Welcome in the lair of the dragon. Bienvenue dans la grotte du dragon arc-en-ciel. Bienvenue chez nous for a special bilingual edition. We're gonna rock and roll, cook, boil some wild grapes once again on this full moon, 8th of December. Grateful, thankful that my rent is fully paid. Yours truly, independent artist, independent athlete, independent activist. Triple A plus other dimensions, geopolitical analyst and theorist, great geopolitical analyst and theorist since my analysis back in October 2019 had proven very much to be on the mark by many things that are happening. So thus I'm advocating the implementation of my Trinity theory, CIT, citizen integration theory, debt row fusion theory, and democratic fusion theory, dot Trinity theory via the fourth dimension, LOV with consent, hug like you never hugged before. Today is my main message to anybody gonna listen to this today, tomorrow, or in the future. Bienvenue, Joe. That was, well, of course, when I've developed the workout training program, of which I've successfully completed 300. I've also made it to go hand in hand with World War III scenarios and am a great, super, and excellent geopolitical analyst and theorist, albeit I admit that some things I'm mediocre. I admit that some things I'm average. I admit that some things I'm so-so. But I'm a great geopolitical analyst and theorist, and so have made and created and produced that, of course, work out to go hand in hand with my World War III scenario. Since back in October 2019, yours truly taking into consideration the geopolitical events which had transpired, such as the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, aka Kathy Meng, and other geopolitical events around the world, which have accelerated during COVID and passed with the Russia-Ukraine stalemate and crisis and war that is ongoing in Europe, the biggest national global security threat since the Second World War, and of course the biggest war in Europe since the Second World War as well. Right here from Quebec, yours truly, Quebecer, Canadian, North American, many past lives, many incarnations. I'm also a world peace advocate, but I'm also a geopolitical analyst and theorist who admits that some things I am mediocre, admit that some things I am average, admit that some things I am so-so, albeit being so-so, average, and mediocre. Some things I'm great, super, and excellent. And some other things such as boxing, working out, training, and exercising. Got some brain and some muscle, and I'm super geopolitical analysis. Be able to, of course, analyze deep, complex dimensions of socioeconomics and culture, past, present events, geopolitical cultures and civilizations, and regional geopolitical regions and formations of alliances in XYZ. And that is what I did back in October 2019 as an independent geopolitical analyst and theorist, and of course have made and created the workout to go hand in hand with my World War III scenario when I've concluded back in October 2019 that humanity were on again on a path towards an international conflagration, and so made, created, and designed the General War Integrated Total Body Training System, of which September 29th of this year, September 29th of this year, have officially performed 300 sessions that I set out to do, and it's still workout, train, exercise, efficient, simple, and effective workout training program that requires no equipment. Yours truly, welcome to the Dragon's Lair, bienvenue. And that is why I'm advocating for the implementation of my Trinity theories due to geopolitical events ongoing during COVID. And during COVID, I don't know what caused COVID. I've said it before, I got my Trinity on COVID. I know I had it 3 times back in 2020, February, late January till mid-February or late February or so, 22 days or so, was very sickle and disease. It was like death, pestilence, and disease. And I had it in 2021, and this year, a few months ago, triple vaccinated, open for business. Please increase in hygiene in public. I don't know what caused COVID. I believe it was snakes to human beings transmitted. Third, I cannot rule out another possibility. That's my Trinity on COVID. Don't know for sure, think it was snakes who transmitted it, or another possibility. Cannot rule be out since I believe it was snakes but can't confirm it. So there's a doubt, as we say, and there's not confirmation 100%. Thus, I cannot rule out another possibility. XYZ, man-made virus, accident in the lab, speculation, blah, blah. But what I do know, fourth dimension to that Trinity, is that before COVID, 93 days before I had it, back in October 2019, I had made and created and designed the General Integrated Total Body Training System to go hand in hand with a World War III scenario, which in a nearly paradoxical, providential manner resembles the current situation, current global situation, current geopolitical events where we are. And I am a Quebecer, Canadian, North American. My policy for the collective North American civilization. I'm speaking to my brothers and sisters in the USA as well, since I was born in the USA twice in past lives. I've been an open book for Disney Discovery for lots of years. I'm a rainbow dragon. And don't need to spy on me or CMPC, CIA, FBI, because I watch a little PORN and a little bit of that adult movies. As a matter of fact, I consent I wouldn't mind doing for world peace. Some of that adult loving my own self, anyways. And I got a tiny little androgynous sparkly dick, tiny hands, tiny feet. admit by myself, don't, I'm not gonna be able to lift the sword of freedom because it's double-edged. My sister, if she helps by her solo, on a second thought, I think she can lift it by her solo, my sister, the sword of freedom, because it got responsibility and obligations and duties. And I'm grateful for today. My rent's paid, fully paid for this month of December. My rent is fully paid for this month of December, December 8th already. Passing going today's where I got carpe diem it every day. Do what I love. I fight my own battles. If anybody want to put the gloves on, whether leader of the free world, whatnot, XYZ, we can put on the gloves and we can tango, dance, freestyle, battle rap, XYZ. This Rainbow Dragon fights his own battles. Imagine a president, prime minister who would fight his own battles. That would be a fucking sight. Anyways, 5:18 p.m. Make love tonight is the main message with consent, because otherwise, what are we fighting to save civilization for if somebody's not making LOV tonight? Are we ready to launch those ICBM nuclear warheads? It is serious, of course, and part of my, geopolitical analysis and part of my work as a geopolitical analyst and theorist, philosopher of North America, and my philosophy for geopolitics of North America is we got two borders and two oceans. That way, the east is the Atlantic, the west in the back of me, that way is the Pacific. And of course, my advocacy for the public-private partnership for North America, for the collective North American civilization, and the creation of the public-private partnership army of Dragan, the Dragon army, complementary to the Dancing Goddess army, a public and a private partnership for the 21st century is what I'm advocating. I'm not perfect, far from it. I got some philosophy, some brain and muscle, and it requires brains and muscle for us to build, maintain, and upgrade civilization. It requires a little bit of each, a little bit of emotions. I get triggered, I get upset, I get moody, XYZ. I've been through depression and suicide. I've conquered depression, and here I am continuing my work on YouTube, the Real Raw Revolutionary channel. I'm going to boil some grapes, and I'm going to say, of course, that I'm calling all willing, loving to support the world peace dream, which by world peace advocacy, the dream is, of course, the Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Kingdom, my public-private partnership, and the implementation of my trinity of theories, the CIT, citizen integration theory, debt fusion theory, and democratic fusion theory via the fourth dimension, that trinity to be implemented via love, to create two complementary covenant and cooperative institutions. Now, French. En français, bienvenue dans la grotte du dragon. On va bouillir des raisins, we're gonna boil some. On va bouillir des raisins sauvages. Je remercie les fermiers de la belle province dans la grotte du dragon arc-en-ciel, votre philosophe qui danse le plus de la belle province, un artiste, athlète indépendant. Merci, M. Legault et le gouvernement pour les quelques $100. Ça m'a aidé parce que je suis en crise financière. Je l'admets, votre poète qui danse, philosophe, québécois, canadien, nord-américain, votre dragon arc-en-ciel, Adrien, le québécois, qui est des fois Adrien après-midi ou des fois après le matin. Dragon arc-en-ciel dans la grotte, fait du rock'n'roll, la philosophie. Je vous invite tous et toutes à faire l'exercice physique régulier, car ça a été, ça sera ma médecine et thérapie de choix. Donc, faites un couple de pompe et avec consentement, donnez-vous un câlin comme jamais avant. Ça sera dans le futur passé conjugué dans le naturel. Mon message principal, avec consentement, donnez-vous un câlin comme jamais avant, est mon message principal. Faites de l'amour à soi avec consentement, parce que Québécois, Canadiens, Nord-Américains, du collectif de civilisation nord-américaine, comme théoricien en géopolitique, comme théoricien en analyste, de mon analyse en géopolitique. En 2019, en octobre, j'avais conclu que l'être humain, nous autres, on est en l'humanité, la civilisation humaine, on est encore sur un chemin de la Troisième Guerre mondiale. Puis après ça, j'ai eu la COVID 93 jours après. Moi, ma trinité sur la COVID, je ne sais pas exactement. Je pense que c'est les serpents qui l'ont donné dans les êtres humains. Je sais que je l'ai eu 3 fois. En 2020, j'étais vraiment malade au début, la première vague de la COVID. 2021 moins, 2022, un couple de mois cette année. Moi, je suis 3 fois vacciné. Je vous encourage à l'hygiène dans le public. Gênez-vous pas pour l'hygiène dans le public. Gênez-vous pas pour l'hygiène dans le public. Lavez-vous les mains avec du savon. Lavez-vous les mains avec du savon. Lavez-vous les mains avec du savon. On se lave bien comme il faut. Que votre philosophe arc-en-ciel vous encourage à toutes et tous à l'hygiène en public. Et merci, remerciements aux fermiers de la belle province, les travailleurs de l'Hydro-Québec du passé, du présent et du futur. C'est grâce à vous autres que je chauffe mon café en ce moment, avec l'électricité qui ne pollue pas en tout et environnementale. Puis en plus de ça, hey, regarde, les lumières, puis je suis en train de faire cette vidéo avec l'électricité qui ne pollue pas. Merci les travailleurs du passé, du présent, puis je vous crédite des gros câlins, des arc-en-ciel avec des bisous, puis des chatouilles avec ça, puis de l'amour, puis des philosophies, puis des chansons rock'n'roll pour l'eau que ça coule dans la rivière, ça coule dans la rivière, ça coule dans la rivière. Et je vais chauffer, je vais faire bouillir mes raisins sauvages pour faire du jus pour le temps des fêtes avec de l'électricité qui ne pollue pas pantoute. Et je vous remercie beaucoup de travailleurs du passé, camionneurs, tous les fermiers, parce que tous, il faut qu'on mange. J'ai remercié le gouvernement pour les quelques $100, aussi comme $500, je pense. J'étais déjà dans le rouge, fait que ça m'a bien aidé parce que mon loyer était payé pour le 1er décembre, j'ai payé mon loyer le 1er décembre, j'ai payé mon facture d'électricité le 1er décembre. Puis là, hier, le 7 décembre, j'ai eu un couple de, comme, je pense, $500, quelque chose comme ça, que le gouvernement envoie pour adresser le coût de la vie, que c'est difficile. Puis je suis content pour le temps des fêtes, je vais être capable de m'acheter du vin, je me suis déjà acheté du bacon, du fromage, je me suis acheté du jus, en parallèle avec le jus sauvage que je fais. Et bien ça, je me suis acheté quoi d'autre? Des biscuits. Des biscuits. Il va me falloir du jambon, je vais m'en acheter pour faire avec ma soeur un temps de fête pour Noël, puis pour le nouvel an, je vais pouvoir m'acheter du mousseux parce qu'il me reste comme $70 pour la dépense après avoir payé un petit peu de ma dette parce que je suis $10 000 en dette à la Banque Royale, déjà dans le moins. Je paye un peu de ma dette, je paye un peu de mon mobile, puis voilà, je suis là ici. Bon, les raisins, les grapes. J'en ai beaucoup, regardez-moi ça. On va faire 2 batchs. Oui, c'est tout des raisins, ça. It's all grapes for the harvest. And now I'm going to say again for the implementation. Here's the implementation of my Trinity of theories. Of course, CIT, Citizen Integration Theory, Democratic Fusion Theory, and Debt Refusion Theory. Debt Refusion Theory has to come first. So taking all private and public debt, refusion theory is this. Taking all the private and the public debt, private institutions and citizens like myself, who are $10,000 in debt to the RBC, all debt, public and private, Canada, the US, Mexico, and beyond, but first and foremost, North America, refusing, meaning converting it to the US dollar, says the United States dollar, the US dollar, the currency is still the currency of choice for international finance, for global trade and world commerce. The US dollar still is the top currency of the world. So refusing it, meaning creating all that debt, transfusing it, the public and the private debt of Canada into US dollars, the public and the private debt of Mexico into US dollars, and beyond North America, NATO member countries, Israel, and of course beyond, who are allies, will be, and to create what I call the UE. The UE stands for Universal Exchange Unit en français, ça va être l'unité d'échange universelle, l'UE aussi, unité échange universel. Fait qu'en anglais et en français, c'est les deux, ça va être unité d'échange universelle, l'UE. Oui, ça va être comme le dollar américain, puis on va faire l'intégration monétaire, comme ils ont fait en Europe, mais si l'Europe vient nous joindre, sinon c'est l'Amérique du Nord, if not, Europe doesn't want to join, ou Israel va nous joindre, ou Afrique va nous joindre, ou Central Amérique, on fait en Amérique du Nord en premier, so North America first, and then whoever wants to join us and just create the UE, preferably by biometrics, the eye and the voice are unique biometric identifiers, and a public-private partnership, and then of course with that money, all the debt will be the initial money supply, and then put an interest on all loans, whatever XYZ loans is 10% by principal, no more than 10% on all loans. So that will be the maximum across all banks, 10%. So by the hand and voice ID being unique biometric identifiers. And now yours truly, Adrian Hannah Dragan, and Dragon Pansexual, founder of the Dancing Guys and Dragon. We'll boil some grapes. I think I'm going to tie my hair. Je vais attacher mes cheveux. Je vais laver mes mains. I'm going to wash my hands with some soap. And I'm going to put on some coffee. Dancing is after the cooking, so I'm gonna put some news. I'm just gonna write on BIS 80 trillion. Je vais juste regarder des vidéos à partir de something that one by the BIS Bank of International.
Some foreign exchange derivatives, such as FX swaps, forwards, and currency swaps, require that the full principal amount be exchanged at maturity. This distinguishes them from other types of derivatives in which some foreign exchange derivatives, such as FX swaps, forwards, and currency swaps, require that the full principal amount be exchanged at maturity. This distinguishes them from other types of derivatives in which the principal is not exchanged. Banks and non-bank financial firms are the biggest users of FX swaps. They use them to fund and hedge portfolios, as well as to take positions. Most FX swaps have the US dollar on one side and have very short maturity. This makes FX swap markets vulnerable to dollar funding squeezes. We saw this during the Great Financial Crisis, and again in March 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic went global. Because the payment obligations from FX swaps are not recorded on the balance sheet, they are generally not picked up in standard debt statistics. Yet the scale of the dollar payment obligations is staggering, at more than 80 trillion in mid-2022. The bulk of this dollar debt is likely owed by entities outside the United States, for which the US dollar is a foreign currency. As of mid-2022, non-banks outside the United States owed as much as 26 trillion in such missing debt, up from 17 trillion in 2016. This is roughly double their dollar debt on their balance sheets. Similarly, non-US banks owed upwards of 35 trillion, compared to an estimated 15 trillion in dollar debt on their balance sheets. Since this debt is missing in standard debt statistics, it is difficult for analysts to anticipate the scale and geography of dollar rollover needs. Policymakers need statistics that better capture these short-term, off-balance sheet obligations.
Je vais faire le lavage des raisins ensemble. I'm gonna boil the grapes in this. I'm gonna wash, rinse.
L'étoile des certificats de placement garantis a perdu du lustre au cours des dernières années. Certains se plaisent même à s'en moquer en les appelant les certificats de pauvreté garantie. Alors, devriez-vous rejeter d'emblée cet outil de placement? Ou a-t-il toujours une place dans vos épargnes? Mon nom est Vincent Fournier et dans cette vidéo, j'explique le concept du certificat de placement garanti, ses avantages, désavantages et leur utilité.
Intéressant. Claire gestion de placement. J'ai des câlins et des bisous. Des câlins et des bisous rock'n'roll, mon
le
cher.
Le certificat de placement garanti, aussi appelé CPG, est un produit d'investissement bancaire. C'est un outil utilisé par les banques pour se financer.
He's speaking about finance here in Quebec. I'm not going to translate every word, but he's going to leave it. It's an advertisement, but
entreprise qui
it's
veut
interesting.
financer son fonds de roulement.
You can always
Le
learn.
CPG est tout simplement un placement.
I told him in French that I got kisses, hugs, and
Mis à
tickles,
part
which is
quelques
true.
exceptions, les CPG
Voilà, for
ne
the
sont
bank
pas
for
rachetables
Quebecers.
avant l'échéance. En d'autres mots, vos fonds sont gelés jusqu'à échéance. Le CPG est protégé par la SADC ou la Société d'assurance dépôt du Canada, une société d'État qui a pour objectif d'assurer la stabilité du système bancaire canadien. Toutes les banques à charte sont membres de la SADC et profitent donc de sa protection pour leurs clients. C'est la garantie du CPG.
Grapes,
La Société d'assurance dépôt du Canada offre une assurance qui couvre notamment les dépôts bancaires, les certificats de placement garantis et les comptes d'épargne jusqu'à concurrence de 100 000 $ par institution financière. Au-delà de ce niveau, la garantie ne s'applique plus en cas de défaut de l'institution bancaire. Il est important de savoir qu'il existe plusieurs techniques pour multiplier la protection. Les banques enregistrent parfois plusieurs chartes bancaires de façon à ce qu'elles puissent offrir plusieurs produits admissibles à la protection de la SADC au sein d'une seule institution. On peut également investir dans différentes banques. Finalement, on doit savoir que chaque personne morale a droit à sa couverture. On peut donc avoir un REER, un CELI et un investissement taxable et avoir une protection de 100 000 $ pour chaque compte, puisque ce sont différentes personnes morales. Les 6 grandes banques du Canada sont protégées par la SADC. Les banques de l'annexe 2 et de l'annexe 3, qui sont de plus petites banques ou des filiales canadiennes de banques internationales, le sont également. Si on compare les CPG aux obligations gouvernementales ou municipales, qui sont également reconnues comme ayant un risque de crédit très faible, on note deux différences majeures. Tout d'abord, les obligations gouvernementales peuvent être vendues sur le marché secondaire avant l'échéance. Puisque l'on peut les transiger, les obligations doivent donc avoir un prix et ce prix doit fluctuer lorsque les taux d'intérêt les influencent. Par exemple, l'obligation avec un coupon de 2% sera beaucoup moins alléchante qu'un titre porte un coupon de 5%. Le prix sera alors l'élément qui permettra d'arrimer son rendement à échéance. Dans le cas des certificats de placement garantis, puisqu'ils ne sont pas négociables ou transférables, leur prix n'a pas besoin de fluctuer. Ils sont toujours affichés à leur prix d'origine. Lorsqu'on doit négocier avec un investisseur émotif ou craintif, le CPG crée l'illusion d'un placement sans aucun risque puisqu'il est toujours au même niveau. Par contre, il n'est pas sans risque. Si vous avez acheté un CPG à 0,5% l'an passé, votre risque aujourd'hui est surtout de ne pas avoir la chance de le réinvestir à des taux de plus de 4% jusqu'à ce qu'il vienne à échéance et ainsi de pouvoir obtenir un meilleur rendement. Vous ne perdrez pas d'argent sur votre investissement de départ, mais votre rendement sera moindre. Est-ce que le CPG peut être un placement intéressant? En économie, c'est le jeu de l'offre et de la demande qui dictent les choses.
I mean debt, I
Lors
cannot
des années
invest, but I
où les
invest in
banques
the body.
centrales
J'investis
ont
dans le corps,
écrasé
voilà.
volontairement
Faire
les
des
taux près de
pompes,
zéro,
l'entraînement physique,
les banques pouvaient
la culture
accéder
du
à
Québec,
des fonds
cultural and
presque
philosophical
gratuitement
and geopolitical,
auprès des banquiers
la
centraux.
philosophie de la
Ils n'avaient
théorie
pas besoin
géopolitique,
d'emprunter beaucoup de
le
capital
Québec, Canada,
auprès des
nord-américain,
épargnants.
le
Ils
collectif
n'avaient donc
nord-américain.
pas intérêt à offrir un bon taux sur les CPG, d'où leur mauvaise presse. Aujourd'hui, par contre, les autorités réglementaires ont restreint le robinet d'argent. Les banques doivent donc attirer un peu de capitaux des épargnants en affichant des taux plus alléchants.
Wow,
Bien
I think I'm
qu'investir
gonna be able to
100%
do
de
3.
toutes vos épargnes dans un CPG pour financer votre retraite peut être une recette pour faire
batches.
échouer
3
lamentablement votre projet, il ne faut pas balayer le CPG du revers de la main. Le CPG, comme les actions ordinaires, les actions privilégiées, les obligations gouvernementales ou corporatives, est un outil de placement. Il peut être la solution à envisager si vous avez un décaissement précis avec une date précise à court ou moyen terme. Par exemple, mettre une mise de fonds sur une maison dans 36 mois. Il peut également faire partie de la portion sans risque de votre portefeuille si le jeu en vaut la chandelle. Si les banques offrent du 5% sur les CPG, alors que les obligations gouvernementales sont à 4%, on peut décider d'y investir une portion de notre portefeuille. On peut construire des stratégies similaires à celles
We're
utilisées
gonna be
en
here for, we're
obligation.
gonna do 3
On peut, par
batches, so we're
exemple,
gonna be here for a
faire
few
l'échelle
hours.
d'échéance ou cibler des échéances particulières
I'm gonna bring the
pour
chair
essayer
and
de
we're gonna...
profiter du contexte de marché des taux d'intérêt. En résumé, les CPG ont une mauvaise presse dans le passé, mais cet outil peut quand même avoir de l'intérêt dans une stratégie d'investissement.
Listen to the news and finance, on va écouter les nouvelles de la finance.
Pour plus de conseils sur l'investissement, visitez notre site web au claret.ca et n'oubliez pas de cliquer sur le bouton s'abonner ci-dessous.
Got enough for 3 this time. The 2 last one, this is the third one. I did 2, and this is gonna be 3. So basically, it's gonna be 7 times that I'm gonna be doing 7 batches total, but I went 3 collections. J'ai fait 7 en total, ça va faire, mais j'ai allé 3 fois pour 3 récoltes qui m'ont donné 7. 3 harvests, 7 batches. I'm gonna prepare them.
Protection. You shouldn't
It's gonna
have to
boil. This is gonna boil. So we're gonna be here for a long video today.
strategic advantage.
See?
Visit goldhub.com.
Hey guys, All in Crypto here, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for the third YouTube video of the day. I wasn't actually intending on making another YouTube video. However, the sheer shocking nature of some of the news that we're getting from the Bank of International Settlements in regards to a huge sort of black hole of dollar debt that they're only just uncovering really has pricked my ears up. And you guys know that ultimately we think, given the macroeconomic conditions, that there's pain ahead for markets as they are, yet they're going to and set to get tighter. And I think that one real aspect that people are underpricing when they're coming up with their price models to where they should or shouldn't be investing is systemic risk, systemic failure on an economic global scale. The dollar being the world reserve currency, it's almost acted like that poison that is now being given to everyone. And essentially, you know, they've all drank from the same cup and they're all going to ultimately get sick as a result of it. That's a good way for me to describe the dollar as a reserve currency.
Wow.
You're going to have to forgive me, guys. Like I said, I didn't plan on... currently got trades on that I'm watching, so I'm going to be in and out. We're going to talk about the yield. That's a good way for me to describe the dollar as a reserve currency. Poison that is now being given to every economic global scale. The dollar being the world reserve currency, it's almost acted like that poison that is now being given to everyone. And essentially, you know, they've all drank from the same cup and they're all going to ultimately get sick as a result of it. That's a good way for me to describe the dollar economic global scale. The dollar being the world reserve currency, it's almost acted like that poison that is now being given to everyone. And essentially, you know, they've all drank from the same cup and they're all going to ultimately gets sick as a result of it. That's a good way for me to describe the dollar as a reserve currency. You're going to have to forgive me, guys. Like I said, I didn't plan on currently got trades on that I'm watching, so I'm going to be in and out. We're going to talk about the yield curve as well, because this is something when we talk about systemic failure that we've spoken about a crisis, a black swan-like situation that we're potentially moving towards. You know, we've scenario forecasted for Bitcoin, for example, how we think we get there. And essentially, I think we get to the bottom of markets is with some sort of a March 2020 style event, and we're setting up similarly to what we did in March 2020. For the stock market, it looks sort of like before we go into that deep dive in 2008. This sort of debt and there being a dollar squeeze as a result of it has actually been present in many financial crises, and certainly in 2019 when they were up in interest rates, had a little bit to do with currencies in the repo market. And then obviously the great financial crisis, we saw this again. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. We're going to explain it as best I can. This also explains why we're seeing such a volume of daily FX turnovers subject to settlement risk remaining stubbornly high at $2.2 trillion. And could this also explain why you've seen worldwide central banks quarterly gold purchasing tons go through the roof? Is it because they're worried also about a failure of, a systemic failure in terms of finance, but they're actually worried about the dollar, which, if you look at fiat systems, really they're just liability-based systems, they're debt-backed systems. I believe potentially what this yield curve, given the steepness, that we've never seen a yield curve this steep, or we may have, but certainly not since 1989. Is this yield curve potentially predicting the rollover of the current monetary system, which is this yield curve potentially predicting 89? Is 1989? Not since 1989. Not since 1989. Is this yield curve potentially predicting the rollover of the current monetary system, which just doesn't make sense to begin with? There's more debt out there than there is money to pay it, and it's now at an expansive or a more aggressively expansive rate of expansion as a result of what the Fed's done with their interest rate hike. So I really do not see any way, or I don't see everything that's going on right now ending very well at all. And you're going to ask yourselves, all in crypto, what the hell are you doing talking about all this stuff? You guys will know that we've become engrossed with the macro situation and sort of really highlighting that there's something not quite right here for the best part of this
year. The boils,
and it just gets worse and worse. And even before, the start of this year, we were looking at the fact that the yield curve had inverted, or at the start of this year, I say the yield curve had inverted, and what this potentially may mean. It's got a 100% hit rate of something serious taking place. And what we're seeing today come out from the Bank of International Settlements may be a factor in it. So let's go ahead and play the clip, their actual official video, and then I will read through it. This is going to be a long video, guys. There's a lot to unpack. It's a very complex thing to explain, but I'm going to try and do my best as I understand it.
Some foreign exchange derivatives, such as FX swaps, forwards, and currency swaps, require that the full principal amount be exchanged at maturity. This distinguishes them from other types of derivatives in which the principal is not exchanged. Banks and non-bank financial firms are the biggest users of FX swaps. They use them to fund and hedge portfolios, as well as to take positions. Most FX swaps have the US dollar on one side and have very short maturities. This makes FX swap markets vulnerable to dollar funding squeezes. We saw this during the Great Financial Crisis, and again in March 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic went global.
So basically, he's sort of saying here that when you have a lot of these swaps maturing at one time, you end up with a fund squeeze where the funds aren't there and there's a real dollar squeeze. And this can lead to risk across the board. Essentially, the debt not being paid, which may have cascading effects. And this is essentially, the death of this system is going to be, in my opinion, on a failing of the debt that backs it. And we're seeing real issues. He's going to go on to talk about $80 trillion of unaccounted for debt through this swap market.
Because the payment obligations from FX swaps are not recorded on the balance sheet, they are generally not picked up in standard debt statistics. Yet the scale of the dollar payment obligations is staggering, at more than $80 trillion in mid-2022. The bulk of
more than $80 trillion in dollar-denominated debt obligations by mid-2022.
This dollar debt is likely owed by entities outside the United States for which the US dollar is a foreign currency. As of mid-2022, non-banks outside the United States owed as much as $26 trillion in such missing debt, up from $17 trillion in 2016. This is roughly double their dollar debt on their balance sheets. Similarly, non-US banks owed upwards of $35 trillion, compared to an estimated $15 trillion in dollar debt on their balance sheets. Since this debt is missing in standard debt statistics, it is difficult for analysts to anticipate the scale and geography of dollar rollover needs. Policymakers need statistics that better capture.
We'll leave it there. So basically it's saying that a lot of banks actually were a lot more indebted than they had initially said. And you know, often you'll use an FX swap maybe to hedge your portfolio, or for example to take a position in something, and if you end up in this situation that position doesn't quite work out, you end up with this sort of bank run situation where you don't have the funds to cover the liability, and there's a lot of liability out there that is not being accounted for, ladies and gentlemen. This is one specific case, but there are, you know, there's going to be corporate versions of this. You're literally, in my opinion, the financial system as we know it is on very thin ice. You're waiting for somebody to chuck something up in the air, and it's going to go straight through that ice and take everybody with it. And then do we see this merging into a new financial system, which I think we are looking at in our lifetimes, genuinely. And to really understand a debt-based system, it's a liability-based system that we live in, that we use in regards to fiat currencies. And I actually think that this potentially is what the yield curve again is predicting. We know something's coming, and I think it's going to be a large amount of defaults and a failure of you know, servicing debt that's going to have cascade that's just not manageable, like we've seen the other financial crises get diverted, and that can get kicked down the road. Doesn't have to be this one, but it's inevitable at some point. But this is just absolutely alarming to me. FX swap forwards and currency swaps create forward dollar payment obligations
and use this to store,
balance sheets, and
utiliser
are missing in standard debt
potentiel
statistics.
pour mijoter pour écraser,
Outside the US, United States,
crush the grapes. Now it's starting to boil.
In such missing
So
debt.
I'm going to begin to crush them. Je vais commencer à les écraser un peu.
2016, non-US banks owe upward of $35 trillion. Much of this debt is very short-term, and resulting rollover needs make for a dollar funding squeeze. Policy responses to such squeezes include central bank swap lines that are set in a fog, so there's no sort of deadline. Or there is, but it's waiting to be paid, with little information about a geographic distribution of.
On va boil 10 more minutes.
This is one of the most alarming things. They don't actually know.
Ça bouille encore 10 minutes, puis je vais faire la même affaire encore. I'm going to repeat.
And it gets to that point where it's kind of like banks giving out, or taking in. It's kind of like people going to those banks all at once and going, "Can we have our money?" And the bank goes, "Well, it's not there. We don't have the funds to pay you basically the debt that we owe." So embedded in the foreign exchange market is huge. Unseen dollar borrowing in an FX swap, for instance, Dutch
prepare the bottles, préparez les bouteilles.
Issuer borrow dollar and lend euro or yen in the spot leg. The later repays the dollar and receives euro or yen in the forward leg. Thus, an FX swap along with its cousin, a currency swap,
One bottle.
A purchase agreement or repo. Remember, it was a repo market that somewhat went wrong in 2019. with a currency rather than a security as a collateral. So remember, these, just like a security, can move up and down as well. So the sheer amount here is absolutely staggering. The key takeaways are FX swaps, forward swaps give rise to dollar obligations that were backstopped in 2008 and 2020.
I'm gonna rinse it inside so it's not the. Still got a bit of smell.
Yeah, so this is the thing, I don't even know who owes it. For non-banks outside the United States, dollar obligations for FX swaps.
Rinse it. Le rinçage des bouteilles. Pour que ça mélange. So that it doesn't mix with what the grape juice, le raisin, jus de raisin, ça mélange pas avec ce qu'il y avait avant.
Only in their operations owed an estimated $39 trillion from FX swaps forwards and currency swaps. Not looking good, guys, at all. So there's a lot of debt out there that needs to be paid.
Rinse this one. We'll just have water, so.
And this is the thing you've got to ask yourself.
This one's okay, but just gonna rinse it again like this. Have water, so it's not just water. C'est juste de l'eau, fait que c'est pas la même chose que l'autre. C'était different distinction.
In our lifetime, we are going to see a new monetary system. I think it's actually probably going to merge with the old one. It will be, you know, it's kind of the parasites that be. We'll just find another body, basically. But this is what I think we're looking at is debt failure, and you've got to think to yourself, what do you guys go to work every morning for, and you know, spend the majority of your lives working for? Money, and money is really an obligation to pay a liability down the road, and these guys can't even keep track of who owes what. Well, what value does that actually give to money as a principle, and why, and how is it that people have been somewhat tricked into spending the majority of their lives working for it and giving up? You know, I believe that people should work, but for a fair value, you know, not something that can be totally controlled and manipulated and dictated to us by a very small number of people who can't even keep track of it and have no real interest in maintaining its value and upholding its kind of store of value. That's all I've got for you in this video, guys. It's quite an in-depth one, but certainly an interesting one. I found it very, very interesting. From a trading point of view, I've got to ask myself, okay, what's this going to do for dollar demand?
Hardcore financial events unfolding as we speak. And I'm listening to this Bank of International Settlements, known as BIS. There's a report of an 80 trillion. 1 trillion is 1,000 billion, is 1 billion is 1,000 million, of some shady debt, hidden US dollar debt. 80 trillion, that is a big number. That's whole economies, right? It's 11 times black cock, right? It's 11 times black cock. It's 11 times black cock. It's so I'm referring to the financial institution from global, international, worldwide, but it's mainly New York. Hey, Mr. Fink. I believe Mr. Fink and me can do some partnership, cooperation on the implementation of my Trinity theory, known as the DRT, debt refusion theory. Je suis en train d'écouter un reportage, mais c'est plus des opinions puis des analyses indépendantes sur YouTube de la Banque pour Settlements Internationaux, une institution économique, financière, commerciale, globale, internationale, mondiale. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a 80 trillions. Un trillion, c'est 1000 milliards, comme un milliard, c'est 1000 millions, ça a beaucoup de zéros. En dette, cachée, on ne sait pas si exactement où, mais qu'il y a 80, c'est un gros chiffre qui pourrait amener l'économie mondiale, un crash financier mondial en 2023. It could trigger a global financial black swan event. Okay, man.
number of other things. How is this going to affect our plays moving forwards? But that's for another video. I'm going to love and leave you on that note. If you enjoyed the content, like, as always, appreciate it. So as a comment, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in the next YouTube video. Thanks a lot for watching, guys.
What should the future deliver? Progress, innovation, or stability, protection? You shouldn't have to choose. Gold.
Crush again some more. Je vais écraser les raisins encore.
Visit goldhub.com.
I'm going to stir, and crush again.
Are you an investor looking for premium market opportunities?
Crush them again,
Presenting premium and exclusive service for investors by Calcone.
Pension funds and other non-bank
Let it boil
financial
for 10 more
firms
minutes.
have more than $80 trillion of hidden off-balance sheet dollar debt in FX swaps, according to the Bank for International Settlements.
Wow.
The Bank of International Settlements, or BIS, dubbed the central bank of the world's central banks, also said in its latest quarterly report that 2022's market upheaval had largely been navigated without major issues. Having repeatedly urged central banks to act forcefully to dampen inflation, it struck a more measured tone and picked over crypto market troubles and September's UK bond market turmoil. Its main warning concerned what it described as the FX swap debt blind spot that risked leaving policymakers in a fog. FX swap markets where, for example, a Dutch pension fund or Japanese insurer borrows dollars and lends euro or yen before later repaying them have a history of problems. They saw funding squeezes during both the global financial crisis and again in March 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic wrought havoc that required central banks such as the US Federal Reserve to intervene with dollar swap lines. According to BIS, the $80 trillion plus of hidden debt estimate exceeds the stocks of dollar treasury bills, repo and commercial paper combined. It has grown from over $55 trillion a decade ago, while the churn of FX swap deals was almost $5 trillion a day in April, 2/3 of daily global FX turnover. For both non-US banks and non-US non-banks such as pension funds, dollar obligations from FX swaps are now double their on-balance sheet dollar debt, it estimated. The missing dollar debt from FX swaps, forwards and currency swaps is huge, according to the Switzerland-based institution, adding the lack of direct information about the scale and location of the problems was the key issue. The report also assessed broader recent market developments. BIS officials have been loudly calling for forceful interest rate hikes from central banks as inflation has taken hold, but this time it struck a more measured tone. Asked whether the end of the tightening cycle may be looming next year, the head of the BIS Monetary and Economic Department, Claudio Borio, said it would depend on how circumstances evolve, noting also the complexities of high debt levels and uncertainty about how sensitive borrowers now are to rising rates. The crisis that erupted in UK gilt markets in September also underscored that central banks could be forced to step in and intervene. In the UK's case, by buying bonds even at a time when it was raising interest rates to curb inflation. The report also focused on findings from the recent BIS or BIS Global FX Market Survey, which estimated that $2.2 trillion worth of currency trades are at risk of failing to settle on any given day due to issues between counterparties potentially undermining financial stability. The amount at risk represents about 1/3 of total deliverable FX turnover and is up from $1.9 trillion from 3 years earlier when the last FX survey was carried out. The bank's head of research and economic advisor, Hyun Song Shin, meanwhile described recent crypto market problems, such as the collapse of the FTX exchange and stablecoins Terra USD and Luna, as having similar characteristics to banking crashes. He described many of the crypto coins sold as Dino, decentralized in name only, and that most of their related activities took place through additional intermediaries. Alright, that's all for this video, but let us know your thoughts in the comments below, And don't forget to like and share the video. For more content, you can subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon. I'm James Preston for Calcine Media.
Just wanted to start a business when something surprising happened.
Today I'm going to teach you how to crochet.
She started crocheting, like a lot, and her friends noticed.
Jess, you need to sell those.
So she signed up for Shopify and started building her business.
Yes, I love that.
And after a lot of hard work, this happened.
Oh my gosh, I just made my first sale!
You see, every day, hundreds of businesses get their first sale on Shopify.
We got it!
And the next could be you. So when you're ready to bring your idea to life
And become your own boss.
build it on Shopify.
So you get all your investment advice over the phone?
That's just me. See Jerry over there? He does everything online.
Everything.
Okay, but which way is
Gonna
best?
boil
The
for a
question is,
few
which
more
way is best
15
for
minutes
you?
or so.
With BMO, you can get personalized advice online, in person, and over the phone with an advisor.
I like that.
Exactly, because confidence is always a good look.
So I'm thinking frosted tips.
Oh, that's good. Tips from her, advice from BMO.
Investment advice the way you want it. That's the BMO effect.
The Bank of International Settlements released a bombshell report detailing over $80 trillion worth of short-term dollar debt that exists globally off balance sheets. This means that regulators, central banks, analysts have literally no way of identifying where this debt is, exactly how much of it there is, and that means they can't come up with any potential solutions should there be a dollar funding squeeze. And during both the Great Financial Crisis and during March of 2020, when there were massive crises that happened really quickly, there were absolutely these dollar funding squeezes that caused major problems to the global financial system. And as the title of the Bank of International Settlements report points out, this problem is huge. The debt is missing and it is growing. We're going to go through this report almost line by line here. I'm going to point out all the important takeaways. And number two, I'm going to break it down in a way that's easy to understand, because despite the fact that this whole area, this dollar swaps, currency swaps, foreign exchange swaps, it's a complicated area, but for our purposes, just for what we need to know to live our day-to-day lives and to anticipate what kind of financial problems might come up that will impact us, it doesn't have to be. So we're going to look at this very simply. And if you haven't heard, I am currently running a Christmas sale on my portfolio allocation course. If you want to make sure that whether we've got inflation, deflation, crashes, liquidity squeezes, you know your portfolio is bulletproof and will continue to make money for you, get my course. It's 50% off, linked in the description below. So as you can see, the title of this report is Dollar Debt in Foreign Exchange Swaps and Forwards, Huge, Missing, and Growing. This report is on the Bank of International Settlements website. You can find it by just Googling dollar debt in FX swaps, BIS, and it'll be one of the first results. There's a bunch of articles written about it that link back to it as well. So first of all, there's an explainer. FX swaps, forwards, and currency swaps, they create forward dollar payment obligations that do not appear on balance sheets and are missing in the standard debt statistics. In simple terms, this basically means that all of these different instruments all basically have one result, and that means at some point you're going to have to pay back dollars, and all these instruments don't show up on balance sheets. Therefore, there's no way to accurately see where it all lies, who is overexposed, and how much exactly it all adds up to. Breaking it down, they know non-banks outside the United States owe as much as $25 trillion, and that is up from a lower number of $17 trillion in just 2016. When we look at banks outside of the United States, the number is $35 trillion. Much of this debt is very short term, and the need to roll it over means that a dollar funding squeeze could happen.
And we'll get into the details of this, but that just means that, you know, every day or every week or every month you could have this coming due. You need to locate those dollars to be able to pay them back. This means that in a crisis, when lending suddenly dries up, you could have major spillover effects as everybody's trying to roll this over all at the same time. They're also going to mention policy responses and recommendations because central bank swap lines have no visibility about where all of the short-term debt is located. Now, I can't find the exact press release right now on the Fed's website, but sometime in late 2020, maybe it was early 2021, the Federal Reserve made a change to their swap facility and basically opened it up both for repo and for their swap lines so that if anything like this were to happen again, it would be much easier for the Federal Reserve to use those existing facilities that they just permanently established and say, hey, now anybody that needs this temporary dollar funding can get it. Because at the time in 2020, in March, they had to set these up as temporary facilities. They didn't exist yet just to deal with all of the short-term dollar needs that everybody had. So as of right now, the Federal Reserve has existing facilities now that they've set up that are permanent. They're not really being used right now, but in the case of a crisis where everybody suddenly comes scrambling for dollars, they would have the ability to have people access the Federal Reserve directly for these dollar funding needs. But still, there's no visibility into where all of these short-term needs are and how much of it there is coming from each area and what other currencies might be on the other side of those specific trades. Don't worry, we'll get into that. So here's how it works. An FX swap, FX stands for foreign exchange, for instance, would be like a Dutch pension fund or a Japanese insurer. They would borrow the dollars here, and so they're borrowing dollars, and then they're going to be lending euros or yen or whatever currency. And later, they're going to have to repay those dollars because they borrowed them, so they have to repay them. And on the other side of that, that means they're receiving their other currency, which in this case would either be the euro or the yen. And that's just called the spot leg versus the forward leg. That's not really important. What's important here is the actual mechanic of what happens is I'm going to borrow dollars from you, so I'm going to get dollars from you, and I'm going to lend out my other currency like euros. And then when this all unravels and goes the other way, when we close out this trade, it's going to go the opposite. So they point out that an FX swap and a currency swap, these resemble repurchase agreements, but instead of a security like a treasury or a mortgage-backed security being the collateral, you've got a currency. Now you're probably thinking, wait a second, what's the difference between an FX swap and a currency swap? Because FX stands for foreign exchange. The answer is that currency swaps are FX swaps. They just have a longer maturity than 1 year, and coupons are also exchanged. So mechanically, same thing, just a little bit different details there on the maturity. Now, the comparison that they made to the repo market, if you've been following this channel for any length of time, I've spoken at length about the repo market, and that's where banks go to either get collateral or to get cash. So banks will say, it's a pawn shop. That's exactly what it is. Banks will say, hey, I've got some cash, you've got some collateral, let's swap, and then at a future date, we'll repurchase it from each other and we'll swap it back. That's exactly what's going on here, and this happens globally with currencies as well, and that's what this report is saying. Hey, this is a big deal because there's $80 trillion of this out there and nobody knows how to identify all the details. And the reason for that is because, unlike repo, these instruments are recorded off balance sheet. And for size comparison, there's over $80 trillion in obligations to pay US dollars. These are, number one, very short term, and number two, they exceed the stock of treasury bills. So that's like the national debt. There's over $30 trillion national debt. So this is way bigger than that. It exceeds that, plus all current repo transactions and commercial paper. That's corporate debt combined. Now, this is the biggest part here of the whole report for me, which shows how this can become such a flashpoint where it can just boil over into the crisis so fast. The churn of the deals approached $5 trillion per day in April of 2022. That's 2/3 of daily global FX turnover. $5 trillion per day. So that's what it means when it says this is very short term, that every single day there's $5 trillion worth of these swaps getting rolled over, turned over. And so this is something that could very easily, if the people who have the dollars suddenly pull out for whatever reason, because of risk, because they had something on their balance sheet that they can't provide those dollars anymore, bam, every day there could be up to $5 trillion, or in a crisis even more, that suddenly can't locate their dollars. And if you can't locate your dollars, that means you can't give them back to this person, which means that they can't get their dollars to give them back to that person. And very quickly, this can boil over into a domino effect of financial institutions getting knocked over. And this is why in both 2008 and 2020, central banks didn't really have much information about who owed the debt, but they still had to backstop it. Now, I've said the $80 trillion amount a few times here, but when you count all of them added up together with other currencies, not just ones with dollar on the other side of the trade, the number actually reaches 97 trillion. This matched global GDP in 2021, which was 96 trillion. It was 3 times global trade, and it exceeded both global external portfolio investment and international bank claims at the end of 2021. So this number is absolutely staggering, and like I mentioned earlier, it is very quickly rolling over. $5 trillion a day at sometimes as it's being turned over. The churn is super fast here, which is why this is just like in the cartoons, like a giant cave full of TNT, and there's a match rolling on the floor. It's just waiting to explode. Now, I've mentioned before that we are living in the most over-leveraged global economy in world history, and I've mostly been talking about the debt, because when you look at household debt, when you look at corporate debt, when you look at government debt, just that debt, that long-term debt, people have to pay back dollars, huge, absolutely enormous. But most of the time, I'm completely ignoring the pile of derivatives on top of it, and these off-balance sheet currency swaps are a huge part of that. The amount of leverage in the system here that is so short term, and we'll see in a couple other points here why that is such a big deal. One of them is called maturity mismatch here. But let's go back to the report here to show how dollar dominant all of this short-term debt is. Basically, the dollar is used as a vehicle currency. It's on one side of 88% of outstanding positions. So the way that works is that if an investor bank wants to do go from Swiss francs into Polish zloty, one would swap the francs for the dollars and then the dollars for zloty. So how this works, if you're an investor at a bank and you want to go from Swiss francs into Polish zloty, you would first take your francs and get dollars, and then with the dollars then you get zloty. Now, this points out something kind of fundamental, Economics 101, that money is a winner-take-all game, and this is why the dollar is the global reserve currency, and it's dominant in everything from international trade to things like FX swaps. It's because people prefer to use the money that most other people will use, and so therefore money just naturally tilts over into a winner-take-all game, that one form of money is the dominant form of money everywhere. And that's why gold existed as money for thousands of years, because if there was an alternative presented, well then, even if it was better by some objective standards that somebody sets, well, it's not going to be better because nobody else is going to take it, because everybody else just wants the gold, not because it's better, but because they know that somebody else will take it. This is why other forms of money like rice or seashells or other things just didn't survive as long as money, because it didn't satisfy that coincidence of want, where you would have one person be able to accept the money because they know they can pay anybody with it. You might have to swap it out a couple of times in order to get something. So this thing here, how you go one currency to the dollar to another currency, basically that's the same thing as, hey, you have shoes, and you, instead of those old shoes in your closet, those collector's shoes in your closet, instead of that, you want to, pay your rent. You can't just go give your shoes to your landlord.
Okay,
you're going to have to sell those shoes on eBay, those Jordans on eBay, and take that
10 minutes,
cash, those dollars,
I'm
and
going to
then pay
remove
your
them.
rent.
I'm going to empty
Same
it
thing
and
going on
do
here.
another
It's not a big
batch.
deal, other than the fact that the money is controlled by somebody, by one entity. And so that is where the rubber meets the road here. It's not necessarily bad that you have everybody always kind of wanting to use one currency or one form of money as the intermediary between exchange, as that medium of exchange. That's not a big deal. The big deal is that it's controlled by somebody, and so it can be manipulated to their benefit. All right, let's take a look at some charts here. Basically, this first chart is the one that I want to focus on here. We're looking by currency here, and you can see this orange line is all currency pairs total. So it's a big number. I think it was, what, 97 trillion, something like that. And if you take out all the other currencies and just keep the ones that have the US dollar on one side of it, well, you're still at like 84, 85 trillion dollars. So that just shows how dominant the dollar is in these trades. And the fact that the dollar is on most of these trades and they have very short maturity means that you have the potential for liquidity squeezes. How short is their maturity? Well, the instruments maturing within a week were up to 70% of the FX swaps turnover, but even further than that, we get to a 30% number when we're looking at those that are maturing overnight. So almost a third of these maturing overnight. That's a flashpoint, a disaster, a funding crisis waiting to happen. Now, we do have some visibility into what types of institutions are doing this the most. That's shown on this last chart here, which is going to be the pink section, other financial institutions. This section is non-bank financial institutions, which are going to be things like pension funds, insurance companies, and hedge funds. Also includes non-reporting banks. Now, this is something, I'm going to coin a phrase here. I'm coming up with a new title, and I'm calling this the regulatory roller coaster to tyranny. Basically, what you've seen unfold over the last couple of decades is you have some sort of bad thing happen, some sort of mild crisis. So you come in with a regulation on top of that to try and stamp out that activity from ever happening again. Well, what happens then is you have some losses occur and some spillover effect from that new regulation. It pushes things out, and that causes a new crisis. Well, then that crisis, you have to support it somehow, subsidize it to stop it from spilling over into other areas of the economy, and then that new money, that new stimulus, that new bailout, whatever, causes more risk-taking, more spillover into another area. They have to cap off and stop with more regulations. So you go regulation, bailout, regulation, bailout, regulation, bailout, and eventually you get to this area that's tyranny. Nothing is allowed to happen that is not preordained by this tyrannical system of thousands of pages of regulation that nobody can understand except prior regulators who get compensated well by making their way into banking and financial institutions afterwards. And then you also have another effect out of that where you do have leaks spring, you have other entities. That's tyranny. Nothing bailout, regulation bailout, and a new money, that new stimulus, that new bailout, whatever, causes more risk-taking, more spillover into another area. They have to cap off and stop with more regulations. So you go regulation, bailout, regulation, bailout, regulation, bailout, and eventually you get to this area that's tyranny. Nothing is allowed to happen that is not preordained by this tyrannical system of thousands of pages of regulation that nobody can understand except prior regulators who get compensated well by making their way into banking and financial institutions afterwards. And then you also have another effect out of that where you do have leaks spring, you have other entities pop up. Why do you think there's been so much interest in crypto over the last 5 years or so? It's because the financial industry has become purely corrupt and purely regulated. You have no room for innovation, no room for competitors, no room for small startups to come in and disrupt. You have this overarching tyrannical structure that is keeping everything so compressed, meanwhile subsidizing the whole thing, because without that it'll collapse. So you have a few people getting extremely rich off of this whole corrupt, tyrannical, over-regulated system, and then it springs a leak into something like crypto and people jump in head over heels just to escape all of the tyranny, and then they get burned in something like FTX, which, by the way, is going to follow that same regulatory roller coaster to tyranny as they step in and crush that entire space now once they start rolling out the regulatory red carpet there. And what's going on here that the Bank of International Settlements is highlighting in their report is no different. All they're doing is saying, hey, over the last 5-10 years, what we've seen is through these bailouts and these crises, we've seen these dollar swaps just explode in use globally, because that's the only outlet that financial institutions, non-banks, whatever you are, have in order to get what they need. And they're willing to take on extra risk to do that because they know if everything collapses, the central banks have their back. And if we take a look at these two charts of on-balance sheet debt versus on and off balance sheet debt, the difference is just staggering here. And keep in mind, the y-axes are labeled the same here, so you can get a visual comparison side by side that is accurate. And it's even more extreme when we look at non-US banks. We're sitting over here at 12 trillion for on balance sheet, and we're sitting up at about 50 trillion for off balance sheet. And ultimately, the recommendation is a need for statistics that track the geography of the short-term dollar payment obligations. Ultimately, it's because they say that in each of these episodes where a liquidity crunch arises, the disruptions in the dollar markets led to policy response of things like central bank swap lines, where you just channel dollars to the central banks that need to channel those dollars to financial institutions in their own countries. And they're just straight up saying that the problem is that it's hidden leverage, that the solution is to just come up with some more regulations so that all these non-bank financial institutions and all the banks as well have to report this off-balance sheet activity so that central banks can have oversight to all of this, not to stop it, but just to be aware of where they're going to need to channel trillions of dollars next time, which is not the right solution. The right solution is to let stupidity fail. And yes, at this point, I understand that that looks like the entire global financial system. But when you have a system that incentivizes risk-taking, incentivizes moral hazard, where you have financial institutions who can take a lot of risk and get that upside potential, but anytime there's downside risk, they get saved. That is a system that should be allowed to fail. And lastly, I did tell you I was going to tell you about that maturity mismatch. I missed that part. Let's go back. So these funds that are participating, they normally run a maturity mismatch. This is similar to at a bank. If you go make a deposit at your bank, what the bank will do with those dollars is they will lend them out into debt that it has some sort of a term attached to it, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, whatever it is. And you have the ability to go get those dollars on demand. They're just hoping, this is the age-old scheme that banks run, they're just hoping that everybody doesn't come and get them at the same time. But we know from bank runs of the past that most of the time that eventually does happen. And so maturity mismatch is a very dangerous thing when you have liabilities that are short-term and you have assets that are long-term. You might be asset rich, but in a liquidity squeeze, you could be bankrupt because you have no ability to take that long-term. You might be asset rich, but in a liquidity squeeze, you could be bankrupt because you have no ability to take that long-term asset and go collect on that to meet your short-term liabilities. So at the end of the day, long-term, you might be asset rich, but in a liquidity squeeze, you could be bankrupt because you have no ability to take that long-term asset and go collect on that to meet your short-term liabilities. So at the end of the day, everybody is wondering, what does this mean for me? And ultimately, at this point, with the way that 2020 was handled and every crisis before that, they've basically just exponentially increased the amount of bailout that they allow for the system, the amount of dollars that they can print to give for the swap lines, the repo market, anything like that that needs any dollars, they'll inject the dollars. They've proven that they will do that last time, the time before, and they'll do it again. The Federal Reserve already has facilities established to be able to inject these dollars into any country that needs it, any type of financial institution that needs it. They've created permanent standing facilities for both repo and swaps, domestically and international, and so we probably won't see any sort of an issue arise out of this, even if they don't know where this $80–90 trillion of short-term liabilities are located. Really doesn't matter. what's going to happen when the squeeze happens? Everybody's just going to come knocking, and the Federal Reserve's just with a few keystrokes going to inject the necessary dollars. But long term, the way this plays out is that dollar squeezes, or I should say currency squeezes, are always a result of currency shortages that were the result of the prior currency abundance. That's how these things work. Because they're built on debt, you can look at any single country that has ever gone through hyperinflation, and in the short term, it looks like there's a currency shortage. Always, every time. That's why the solution by the policymakers is always to try and print a little bit more currency just to deal with that short-term currency shortage. But the long-term problem is that you've been using printing as the solution, and ultimately that will result in the death of the currency. Just because you have short-term squeezes where there's a shortage of the currency, that doesn't mean the solution is to print more. That means the solution is to let the failures fail who weren't able to deal with and predict the coming consequences of having maturity mismatch and short-term obligations that they might not be able to meet. The supply of the currency shouldn't move. That should be static, and that allows for a dynamic, thriving system to be built on top of it. You don't want your foundation to constantly be stretching and shrinking in response to whatever's being built on top of it. That will just cause your building to collapse. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.
The Bank of International Settlements just released a report revealing a derivatives time bomb is set to explode in 2023. I'm going to explain this to you in 3 simple, fast steps. Step number 1, let's go over the black swan risks the Bank of International Settlements, BIS, outlined in their report. We start with this chart going back to 2004 all the way to today's date. On the left, we go from 0 up to 80 trillion, and on the right, we go from 0% up to 80%. This green line represents the amount of these derivatives, these kind of secret derivatives that are off balance sheet, they're in the shadows. How many of them, the nominal value that's denominated in dollars. And this red line represents the total percentage that mature in 1 year or less. So now let's go over the numbers. The amount of these derivatives that are off balance sheet, hiding in the shadows, denominated in dollars, back in 2004, the BIS estimates to be about 20 trillion. But you can see that pretty much goes straight up to where we are today at 85 trillion. Now, the total amount of these types of derivatives, around 100 trillion. But these are FX swaps. We're going to get into that in a moment, so don't let that intimidate you. But with an FX swaps, there's 2 currencies that are involved. So it could be the euro and the yen, which would not include the United States dollar. So this delta, the 15 trillion here, are FX swaps, as an example, that are denominated in currencies other than the dollar. But the dollar represents 85 trillion, like we said before, and 80% of this debt, dollar-denominated debt, is due within 1 year. So what are these mysterious dollar liabilities? These derivatives, which Warren Buffett calls weapons of mass destruction. And the mainstream media never talks about. In fact, the mainstream media doesn't even know they exist. Well, it starts with FX swaps. The next category in the BIS report is currency swaps, which is pretty much the same thing, very similar. And then FX forwards. And what I want all of you to remember is that all of these derivatives, all of this dollar-denominated debt is off balance sheet. The marketplace doesn't even know it exists. To further dive into the details of this shocking report, editor, let's cut right to the internet. We are on the BIS's website, BIS.org, and this is a PDF. This report is their quarterly review that just came out the other day. This is for December 2022. This is on page 76 of 90.
So now I'm
Dollar
going to
debt,
remove the
FX swaps, and forwards. Huge
The grapes, je vais enlever les raisins, mais je vais les, drain them really well.
Not exactly a title that inspires confidence in the global economy. FX swaps, forwards, and currency swaps create forward
So this is the leftovers. I mean, this is actually edible.
In other words, dollar
World War III, nuclear war, thermonuclear war, scénario de Troisième Guerre mondiale.
And these obligations
guerre
do not
thermonucléaire, mais
appear
ça c'est.
on balance
J'ai déjà
sheets
mangé
that
un
are
peu
missing
avant-hier.
in standard debt
C'est crunchy, même.
Non-banks outside of the United States owe as much as 25 trillion in such missing debt. And keep in mind, guys, we're not talking about Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank. We're talking about non-banks outside of the United States. So actual real companies that produce stuff, among other things like pension funds, hedge funds, etc. And this $25 trillion amount is up from 17 trillion in 2016. Non-U.S. banks owe upwards of 35 trillion. Much of this debt is very short term, and the resulting rollover needs to make for dollar funding squeezes. In other words, dollar doing exactly what GameStop did, let's say a year ago, when it went from $10 to whatever, $300 or $400, and then right back down. Policy
So now what I'm going to do
to such squeezes include central bank swap lines.
is I'm going to use.
But these are set in a fog.
I'll put the first batch into this. Je vais mettre la première batch dans ça.
Geographic distribution of the missing debt or all of this dollar.
I'm going to use this here. We'll put it on top. It goes right on top this.
What they're saying here is yes, the Fed might have policy tools to combat this, but their policy tools are directed at specific countries.
And we're gonna rock and roll.
In other words,
slow.
the Fed sets up a swap line with the Swiss central bank. Well, how do we know where all of these companies are?
I'll bring it so you can see a bit what I'm doing.
Of mass destruction, hiding in the shadows off their balance sheet.
I'm gonna
This
drain
has huge
all the liquid. I'm gonna try to make sure I don't waste.
Could see come to the
Je veux pas
surface
gaspiller, faire de gaspillage. Fait que
Step number 2. I know many of you right about now are kind of scratching your head.
tranquillement, very easy. Slow, slow, slow.
What on earth is going on?
Tranquillement,
Now,
slow.
in this step, I want to demystify these derivatives. They're actually not that complex. And then you'll be able to understand why this $85 trillion in debt is completely off balance sheet that is coming due within the next year is such a big problem. So let's start by going over something called an FX swap. Now, this is one category of the derivatives that are discussed in this GIS. But once you understand this,
Je vais déplacer ça, puis je vais amener une verre. I'm gonna take a
so let's
glass.
start by going over the swap
And
bank.
put
They're
some
right in the middle, as you would expect,
in
taking their fees and facilitating the
a glass for
transaction.
me to drink
And on
later
the left,
tonight.
you've got firm A,
Leftovers.
say they're in the United States. On the right, you've got firm B, and they are in Europe. Well, this European firm and this American firm both have a problem. You see, they have operations in the United States, and they have
I'm gonna
operations
taste a bit, but
Europe.
first I'm gonna have to
And they
remove
both
this.
need funding.
I'm gonna put
Let's
this
say
here.
$10 million
Try to not do.
to buy some machinery to
Gets
put
dirty a
in
bit.
their
It's
factory
red, c'est rouge, fait que je vais
country
devoir.
where they're not domiciled. Again, this European company needs dollars.
Faire le
Therefore,
nettoyage,
you
do a little
can buy
bit of cleaning,
for their factory in the
and just
United
rinse
States.
it right away.
And
So
vice
this,
versa.
see, this is full
Now
now.
the issue is that both
This,
of these
I'm gonna
firms,
go
because
slow
they're
so I
not
don't spill
domiciled
pour pas faire de
in the area
gaspillage.
where they need the
Je vais
money in the
l'amener
local
ici,
currency,
pap.
they're going to pay an extremely high interest
Juste
rate.
sur les
So
bords un
let's
peu
just
parce
say
qu'il y a
that
des
the United
comme
States
ça.
borrowed in euros
Right,
in
and it's
Europe,
full,
that they would
full,
pay
full.
a 10% interest rate,
See?
and the European company would pay a 9% interest rate in the United States.
And once
So what
it's
they
cooler,
do is they get together
quand
and
c'est
through
moins
this
chaud parce que là
swap
c'est quand même
bank,
bouillant,
bank
c'est
in the
chaud,
middle,
chaud, chaud, it's
they
hot, hot,
agree
hot. So
to create
I'm gonna wait a half an hour,
effectively
and then I'm gonna put it in the bottles. So I'm gonna put it close
but for
here.
some reason it's considered a derivative.
So now it's just
So
gonna stay
what
hot.
Firm A
With this
does,
glass,
they
what I'm gonna
borrow
do
locally
Because there's a bit left over.
They need euros, remember, but they're going to borrow dollars. So let's just say
for us to have a hot glass now.
And in Europe, firm B borrows 10 million
This
euros.
is ready to go for another round.
For a moment, that the euro and the dollar are trading at parity. So the United States firm
this is the leftovers. The leftovers, of course.
That actually, firm B and Europe needs
are all going to go in here.
Borrow it at a much lower interest rate. Let's
so
say
we're going to empty them here. So like this.
Can borrow at 4%.
Easy does it. See now it's
so this
empty,
debt is 10 million euros and $10 million.
Ça, je le mets ici.
Well, I guess it doesn't
ça
go on.
there.
It should.
And now I got a little bit.
Go onto their balance sheet as
a
liability. So firm A now has a $10 million liability. Firm B now has a 10 million euro liability. Then what they do is they go ahead and
now for
swap
the tasting.
The dollars for the
Really
euros.
good.
Because again, firm A
gonna taste
euros,
a bit.
Firm B
First batch.
dollars. So the
Premier
euros
batch.
come right over here, go onto the asset
Let's
side of
taste
their
it.
balance
So this
sheet.
is
The dollars go right over here.
raw.
Asset side of firm B's balance sheet. Let's just say, for the sake of this example,
raw, real, the vrai jus de raisin sauvage, real as you can get in terms of grape juice, straight from the Dragon's Lair, directement de la grotte du Dragon. It's real, hot. This is an event in world history, c'est un événement dans l'histoire du Québec, du Canada, de la Nord-Amérique, puis du monde. Quebec history, Canadian history, North American history, the Rainbow Dragon drinking, own made from the harvested from the grapes from Hawk Island, Montreal, the drinking the grapes, grape juice, hot, chaud du jus de raisin, chaud fait par le dragon arc-en-ciel, votre dragon arc-en-ciel, your rainbow dragon right in my rainbow dragon's lair dans ma grotte de dragon arc-en-ciel. There's no sugar, il n'y a pas de sucre, fait que c'est vraiment du jus de raisin. It's really grape juice at its raw, real naturalness, naturel. You can put sugar. I might put a little bit of sugar if I buy sugar to sweeten it up, but it's real, natural, raw grape juice. It's du vrai jus naturel, de nature grape juice. Real, raw, natural grape juice. Du jus de raisin naturel. C'est bon, it's good, but it's raw, real, natural. It's a bit bitter. It's not sweet at all. Vraiment pas sucré pantoute. It's vraiment red. My favorite color, c'est vraiment rouge comme ma couleur préférée. Puis c'est du jus de raisin pure grape juice, wild grape juice, pure wild grape juice, du vrai jus de raisin sauvage. From the wild. And not so from nature. Wild sauvage. Yeah. I keep it for again, and now this, see, everything's taken off with a few exceptions. It's gonna take this thing there, put it here. There we go. This is gonna be eaten, see? And I'm gonna put the second batch. I'm gonna rinse it a bit. Je vais faire le rinçage un peu. 6. 6. And number 2, numéro 2. There we go. Put some more water actually. Just go. Encore un peu plus, a little bit more. And we're gonna boil, on va bouillir encore. Je vais juste nettoyer, I'm just gonna clean a bit there because just to make sure, I want to keep it clean. Je veux garder ça propre. On garde ça propre bien comme il faut, propre. Là, on nettoie la propriété. Cleanliness, cleanliness, cleanliness. I get dirty. I get back clean, royal dude, a lot. Mais ça arrive, mais je nettoie ça, regarde, dans la grotte du dragon. Puis, comme ça, pas. Encore une fois. Pas. Encore une fois. Pas. Encore une fois. And on sèche, I'm going to dry it because if I turn it back on, if I turn it back on, it's going to be very hot, so I don't want any. It's better to dry it, of course. Better to dry it, and now I'm going to turn it on again. I just seen it a little bit on the side, some red. Some red on the side. Du rousseau. Look at the on the side, some red. Now we're going to turn it on again. I'm going to add the grapes right away. I'm going to do the same thing. On va répéter, mettre les raisins, grapes in it. There we go. Pop, pop. Wash the grapes. On lave les raisins. Bien. We wash the grapes. Good. Make sure they're well washed. They come from nature, ils viennent de la nature, de dehors. And dry, and we put them in. One. So again, wash. Grapes, on les lave avant qu'on les met en dedans. We wash them before putting them in. And water drain, see. Look. Et on les met. And we put them in. And we do again. Grapes. And we wash. Remove some bad grapes. And we drain all this, and we put in. Ta-da! There we go. And one more. Ta-da! Grapes. See? Wild grapes, des raisins sauvages. Wild grapes. See? Are you ready? We're gonna wash. Drain, and that's it. We put some grapes Add them there. There we go. And these grapes here. Wash my hands, wash the side here. There's a little bit of red on the rouge to the bottom. Wash my hands. Spread the grapes a bit with this. On va mélanger un peu le raisin avec ça. We're going to stir a bit with this, of course. We're not going to crush them yet. On va pas les écraser encore. On attend que ça bouille. Même si ça bouille, on le couvercle un peu comme ça. We're going to cover it. Wash the hands again. Dry, dry, dry. And we're going to continue listening to some wafers on the floor. Des gaufrettes sur le plancher. And there we are. We're repeating the process second time. Le processus de bouillition, on fait bouillir le raisin. We're boiling the grapes, and we're going to continue watching the BIS, Bank of International Settlements, information about an $80 trillion debt, hidden debt, and the possible for a black swan event. Je continue à regarder les vidéos sur possible événement de crise financière en 2023. C'est relié à la banque qu'on appelle la Banque internationale. En français, c'est la Banque de règlement international, soit la BRI, Banque de règlement international, fondée en 1930. Et par rapport à des billions de dettes, 80 millions de dettes cachées qui pourraient emmener à une crise, un crash financier global en 2023. C'est vraiment grave. C'était des nouvelles, là, ça a commencé le 3 décembre, je pense. 3rd December. December 3rd started to be in the news. And it could potentially bring. But I have the solution. J'ai la solution. Une partie de la solution en collaboration avec Québécois, Québécoises, Canadiens, Canadiennes, Nord-Américains and beyond. And I think my DRT, ma théorie de réfusion de la dette, c'est la théorie pour l'implémentation pour sauver le monde, to save the world, in other words. It kind of sounds, although I'm not without fault, without issues, vices, je suis pas parfait, j'ai loin de là, puis tellement de choses que je sais pas, so many things I don't know. But anyways, we continue for some.
The term of this loan is 1 year. At the end of the year, they'll pay back principal plus interest. So firm A would pay firm B the 400,000 euro in interest. That would go to the swap bank, and the swap bank would give it to firm B. Why? Because remember, they have this 10 million euro on their, or should be on their balance sheet. They have it swept away hiding in the shadows. But they still owe the 400,000 euro as interest at the end of the year on this 10 million euro debt. So firm B pays the interest plus principal at the end of the term, but they get the principal plus interest from firm A. And then firm A would get the $10 million in principal plus the $500,000 in interest from firm B. At the end of the day, what this simply boils down to is two entities coming to an agreement where they say, hey, you borrow for me, I'll borrow for you, and we'll both come out ahead because we get a cheaper interest rate. So the next question becomes, how can this real debt that has to be paid back at the end of the year with real money be an off-balance sheet item? This makes no sense whatsoever. They're taking trillions, tens of trillions of dollars and just sweeping it under the rug and pretending that this massive amount of risk doesn't exist at all. For answers, editor, go right back to the BIS's website. The debt remains obscured from view. Accounting conventions leave it mostly off balance sheet as a derivative, even though it is in effect a secured loan with principal to be repaid in full at maturity. Only footnotes to the accounts reported. I know most of you right now are saying to yourself, okay, George, well, that explanation that it doesn't need to be on the balance sheet because it's a derivative. Yeah, oh, look, hey, a squirrel. That doesn't make me feel any better about the risks involved. You and me both. I agree with you 100%. So now let's dive into how this house of cards may come crashing down over the next year. Step number 3. So what is the end game? Actually, pretty straightforward. It would look a lot like the GFC times 1,000. And I'm actually understating it. Let me show you why. This is what happened during the GFC. We had, and it's something very similar to what we see in the housing market today, by the way, or at least in 2020 and 2021, where we saw the debt on the average consumer's balance sheet in aggregate total soar higher. Why? Because interest rates decreased dramatically. Therefore, the payment stayed the same. And then we saw the price of the houses, and therefore the debt needed to buy them, go up and up and up, like this. You got one house here, let's say back in 2012, this house would have been, with a monthly payment, would have been $2,000. Price, $500,000 at, let's just say, a 7% interest rate. Actually, we've got to go back quite some time to get to a 7% interest rate, although we do have them now, but we're just using this for the sake of the example. But now we fast forward when interest rates go lower and lower and lower, and as you guys know, with the same monthly payment, the amount of the house that this person can afford goes up significantly. Let's just say, these aren't exact, but let's say that it goes from $500,000 up to $900,000. So just in this one home purchase, there would be an additional $400,000 of debt that was taken on the balance sheet with the exact same monthly payment due to the interest rates going lower and lower and lower. So it's the exact same thing that we've seen play out in the derivatives market. As the interest rates have gone down in the past few decades, the nominal amount of what can be borrowed for the exact same cash flow goes parabolic to the point now where it's at $85 trillion. And that's just these 3 types of derivatives that are off balance sheet denominated in dollars. Remember, the entire pie, BIS estimates that it's over $100 trillion. So let me put it in very simple terms so everyone can understand what we're talking about. Right now, the global economy has a $100 trillion adjustable rate mortgage, and this payment comes due within the next 12 months. So let me put it in very simple terms, $100 trillion. So let me put it with the entire pie, BIS estimates that it's over $100 trillion. So let me put it in very simple terms so everyone can understand what we're talking about. Right now, the global economy has a $100 trillion adjustable rate mortgage, and this payment comes due within the next 12 months. So when these entities go to roll over that debt, they'll have to pay a much higher interest rate. Just like the homeowners had to pay a much higher interest rate when they borrowed initially at, let's say, 2%, that teaser rate. But then when rates went up to 5 or 6%, all of a sudden they can't afford to make the payments. The house goes back to the bank, and the consumer goes bust. Identical to what we might see in the global economy, but obviously at a much, much larger scale. And this is why I said at the beginning of this step that I think calling this GFC times 1000 could be potentially understating the issue. So let's go over, or let's revisit firm A, B, and the swap bank that we discussed in step number 2. So now we know interest rates have been increasing over the past year. Therefore, firm A and firm B's payments will go up when they have to roll over the debt. Well, a lot of these firms are going to go bust, which means the amount of debt goes down because they default on the debt, which would most likely cause the swap bank, the middleman, to go bust as well. Well, wait, there is more. We've just discussed the impact of higher interest rates. Let's not forget that most likely these higher interest rates will lead to a global recession. We talked about the inversion in the yield curve, predicting this in 2023 on this channel all the time. So if we go into a global recession, then these entities' cash flow will decrease. And also, the velocity of money circulating throughout the global economy will go lower as well. This creates an even bigger burden for the existing debt for these entities that are involved in this $100 trillion debt. And lastly, if 85 trillion of this risk that's just off balance sheet, swept underneath the carpet, that's waiting to pounce on the global economy, is denominated in dollars, what happens if we get a global recession? Cash flows decrease, lower velocity. That means most likely the dollar appreciates in value relative to other fiat currencies. Okay, well, let's think this through. If firm A needed euros to set up a plant in Europe and their cash flow is in Europe, but they did this swap with firm B, their cash flow is in euros, but the debt that should be on their balance sheet is denominated in dollars. So if the dollar goes up, the euro goes down, that means the cash flow that they have coming in to service the debt decreases, making this entire doom loop that we've discussed throughout step number 3 even more powerful to the downside. And this is the derivative time bomb that the BIS outlined in their most recent report that is set to explode in 2023. In their most recent number 3, even more powerful to the downside. And this is the derivative time bomb that the BIS outlined in their most recent report that is set to explode in 2023. For number 3, even more powerful to the downside. And this is the derivative time bomb that the BIS outlined in their most recent report that is set to explode in 2023. For more content that'll help you build wealth and thrive in a world of out-of-control central banks and big government, check out this playlist. Right here, I will see you on the next video.
Les forfaits bancaires de la Banque Scotia offrent des récompenses uniques pour des gens uniques comme vous. Envie de voyager ou d'un nouveau studio de yoga? Faites ce que vous aimez tout en étant récompensé. Visitez banquescotia.com/ultime 350. Des conditions s'appliquent. Banque Scotia, vous êtes plus riche que vous le croyez.
Good morning, because Bitcoiners. Welcome to another edition of Breakfast News with me, Snorlax XBT, and Premise. Also got our amazing producers here, Mr. Zenruko and Mr. R. Real quickly, I wanted to give a shout out to BB Chads. I see you guys in the comment section. As always, thanks for tuning in to another great week, another Monday, where we can do these amazing shows for you guys, and you know we really love doing them. A reminder, one more quick reminder before we get the show started, that if you are interested in signing up to become a BB Chad, we have a link in the YouTube description within this video. But yeah, it looks like we are getting a pretty nasty dump here within the last 10 minutes or so. Good morning, because Bitcoiners. Welcome to another edition of Breakfast News with me, Snorlax XBT, and Premise. Also got our amazing producers here, Mr. Zenruko and Mr. R. Real quickly, I wanted to give a shout out to our BB Chads. I see you guys in the comment section. As always, thanks for tuning in to another great week, another Monday, where we can do these amazing shows for you guys, and you know we really love doing them. A reminder. One more quick reminder before we get the show started, that if you are interested in signing up to become a BB Chad, we have a link in the YouTube description within this video. But yeah, it looks like we are getting a pretty nasty dump here within the last 10 minutes or so. They made sure to take this opportunity when I was a little preoccupied and away from the computer, so I'm a little bit upset, I'm not going to lie. But you know, there will be other opportunities this week, so I'm not too worried yet. But yeah, this is a show about news, so if you guys do have anything in particular that you want us to cover, obviously just drop that in the YouTube chat, and we'll try to do our best to get to that on the show today. You know, markets are really at another inflection point. This week is really important. We have, I want to say, PMI. That's what it was, right, Premise? Yeah. PMI later this week. We've got FOMC and CPI, I want to say, either next week or the week after that. So a lot of macro catalysts potentially coming up. I think it's really going to test the theory that, you know, I've been speaking on lately about potentially having a bull crush into the end of the year. Obviously, the more time goes by, I get a little bit uneasier with that prediction. It's going to come down entirely to what the VIX decides to do, and if any big player decides to really initiate some sort of big move in these markets. So I haven't seen that just yet, the initiative aspect, but you know, volatility is definitely something to pay attention to when you have someone like Powell coming to speak up. And you know, obviously the market's trading above 4,000, almost traded 4,100. I think it did trade 4,100 last week. So we are approaching, you know, levels. We are over 10% up off the local lows, 10 to 15% even. So we are decently extended here at the very least. So yeah, it is probably time to start paying attention to shorts, and that's why I really like Carter's strategy on these 6-month put swings, guys. Because you don't have to be right in December. You don't have to be right in January. You just have to be right by like May or June, which is a really long time away. And it gives you a lot of time to find contingency plans if it looks like, you know, it might be taking longer than usual, or, you know, something like that. But I want to hand the mic off to Premise here, because, you know, he had some news that I know he wanted to share before the call. And, you know, I really don't have much news on my front today because, I mean, really in crypto, there wasn't too much that happened this weekend. Really pretty dead market, which makes sense. It should be a little dead after, you know, that's probably a healthy sign, given that so many larger players have been wiped out over the last few weeks, the last few months. You know, lack of volatility is a sign that you're eventually is more than likely a sign that you're eventually gonna bottom sooner than later. Not that I'm calling this a bottom for a second, guys. I am short biased this week. Just cognizant of that fact. There's not really much more than equity algorithms that's going to move this market right now, and all coin markets especially are going to be really illiquid. So just be really careful with that. And without further ado, I'd love to get Premise up here and to open the week.
Yeah, morning everybody. Nice week going. And we had some interesting news topics and stuff. You know, first to correct, my bad, the PPI comes out later this week, but PMI came out, it looked like either this morning or maybe it was even Friday, but it looked like it was this morning, and that's ISM non-manufacturing, and it came in at 56.5 versus 53.3 expected according to this. So it was actually a little high, but it's overall way lower than what it used to be. And then we found more interesting data showing that there's actually now, according to this report, it had some updates in it, we actually have a situation where there's the too low inventory issue is no longer issue. A lot of companies have too much inventory right now. Demand has slowed, and they kind of overproduced over this last year trying to get stuff put in. So now we have a surplus of inventory sitting on some storage shelves, which could see inflation keep edging off as supply chain is no longer an issue. We see gas prices going down across the board as well. You know, the biggest thing about that is I believe G7 just came out with another agreement that Russia can sell oil but at a $60 a barrel mark. So that kind of puts Russia in a situation where they still have oil now flowing into the market. It's kind of funny. Like, I thought we were enemies with these guys. We're like, no, let's take some of your oil. And so we're probably seeing those easing pressures on the oil supply. Some people say Russia won't be happy with the rate they have to sell theirs. It's lower than the going in the market. I think currently USO was trading at like 70 something. But Russia's going to be limited to 60. But we're starting to see these things happen. Zelensky's out there saying, oh, that's a great budget for a terrorist group. Sorry, Zelensky, you're going to have to be quiet. I said this when this first started earlier this year, that when gas pumps start getting expensive, we would start caring less and less about Zelensky's plight for help. And that seems to be the case here, whether you believe in it or not. The truth is that gas prices are going down, and we're allowing Russia to sell some oil at a reasonable, I think it's a reasonable rate. I think they should just be allowed to sell it. If we're going to let them sell it anyway, it's kind of silly. But I can share my screen real quick to kind of show this inventory thing, and then we'll go on to the bigger news that we've got hinted out that's really bad for pension funds. So, you know, Liz Ann Saunders, someone I follow, I recommend anyone follow her. She kind of posted some of these ISM manufacturing numbers. And essentially, this kind of shows with the supply chain issue that we're back to pre-2020 conditions. We had this huge run up, as we know, during the whole lockdown and 2020 issue. And now we're right back into that kind of like this little mean area it seems to kind of trade off of. So that's showing, like, you know, I've always been saying it that I thought inflation was coming down, honestly, and I think this is going to continue to see inflation come down. So it's important to point that out. But the news that we really have that came out big was in the Forex market. So apparently Forex markets have been a little risky with the money, and it's not fun because these are huge pension funds who, you know, as a pension fund, that's people's money going in and they're expecting this back for retirement. We've managed to accumulate an 80 trillion in hidden FX swap debt. And so what happened was they borrowed US dollar and then they went and bought currencies like the euro, yen, whatever you have it, to loan it out. What's the problem? The problem is the dollar has skyrocketed this year against other currencies. So if you caught yourself in this little mess, you now have a bunch of debt that you might not be able to pay off unless the Fed is going to give you a blessing and quit raising rates. So these guys are now desperate. They're going to need the Fed to raise rates. They said the BIS, Bank for International Settlements, warned that pension funds and other non-bank financial firms now have more than 80 trillion of hidden off-balance sheet dollar debt in the form of FX swaps. We thought we had a problem with FTX. We can't even manage our own money either. It's funny that everyone took the chance to take a stab at crypto, but here we have an 80 trillion debt problem building in the Forex markets. It's not the first time something like this has happened, by the way. There are ways they can fix it, but those are going to have to come with deals with the Federal Reserve to do dollar swap lines. I don't know what's going to happen with 80 trillion debt. You know, that's actually, I think the global GDP is like 93 trillion. So this report actually says that the debt dollars is more than reserve to do dollar swap lines. I don't know what's going to happen with 80 trillion debt. That's actually, I think the global GDP is like 93 trillion. So this report actually says that the debt dollars is more than we have in treasury bills and stock. Like, we don't have enough to even cover this unless something huge gives, or maybe we can get the dollar going back down. That way these people, what's going to happen with 80 trillion debt? That's actually, I think the global GDP is like 93 trillion. So this report actually says that the debt dollars is more than we have in treasury bills and stock. Like, we don't have enough to even cover this. We're going to have to come with deals with the Federal Reserve to do dollar swap lines. I don't know what's going to happen with 80 trillion debt. That's actually, I think the global GDP is like 93 trillion. So this report actually says that the debt dollars is more than we have in treasury bills and stock. Like, we don't have.
Oh, Jesus.
Hello, fellow Rebel Capitals. Hope you're well. I'm here with my good buddy Brent Johnson, and we are going to talk about this bombshell report from the BIS talking about 100 trillion, the T dollars, worth of debt that is just hiding in the shadows. It's off balance sheet, and it's just rather staggering. I did a whiteboard video on it. Brent and I were just discussing that. But I think it requires, this is such a big deal. I wanted to bring Brent on the channel today and really kind of do a deep dive for all of the viewers and listeners, because I think this is something that just has to be on people's radar. So Brent, let's go back a couple days, and you said that, I thought you were the one that kind of initially read through this and tweeted it out, but you said someone sent you this. And then
well, I had been tagged on it. I knew it was there. And I hadn't read it yet, but I knew, because I go and I check for these things about every quarter or so.
Yeah.
So I knew that it existed, but I hadn't gotten to it yet. Somebody, and I had it in the back of my mind I needed to read it, and somebody tagged me in a tweet on it. And so then I knew it was kind of being discussed. And so then I read it that morning, and then I started, sending out some tweets and highlighting some graphs. And I had responded to last week, well, a couple weeks ago, there was a podcast with Lacey Hunt and Hugh Henry. And they talked, they didn't specifically talk about this issue, but it touched upon it, right? And there was a response to that podcast on Twitter from someone who said, I don't know why people worry about this euro-dollar market. It's not as big as people think, and it's no big deal. The thing is
and we start.
The disappointing thing is that, this is a smart guy who said this, right? Not just a smart guy, but somebody who a lot of experience, has his own firm, this is a recognized expert, and he's just wrong. Do you know what I mean? I don't think he's purposely being wrong, but it just shows you that even people who have been in this job forever and have been very successful in it, there's a big part of the market that they just don't fully understand.
Massive blind spot.
Right, and the problem is, in his defense, there is not a lot of information about this market. And this is what Jeff Snyder, myself, a handful of other people have been trying to explain for 5 years now. Jeff's been doing it forever. I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years. There's a handful of other people that talk about the euro-dollar market. But those of us who have tried to dig into it and really understand it, we might understand it better than others who don't know anything about it, but even we're not experts because there's limited knowledge, right? And so the disappointing part is when people say, because there's no hard data on it, it doesn't exist. And our point, or at least my point, I don't want to speak for anybody else, my point is that just because the hard data doesn't exist doesn't mean that the danger isn't there. And so then when you get these reports like this that come out from the Bank of International Settlements, which, listen, they can't get the information, I can't. Right? They have more access to it than I do. And so when they come out and they say, listen, this is a concern, and they put these numbers up there, these numbers are probably, as big as they are, they're probably small. It's probably bigger than that. It's probably much bigger than that because, and I can't remember, I was trying to read it quickly before I jumped on here to find, somewhere in there they talk about, they say something to the effect of, we gained this data by doing surveys and talking to, but nobody's required to give them all this information, right? This is just what they could come up with.
Yeah.
And then they even said in there, they're one of my favorite parts. I'm just going to quote it because I don't want to read it wrong. Before I forget, I'm just going to read this. This is near the end. And it's talking about the policy challenges that monetary authorities will run into as a result of this. It says, it's not even clear how many analysts are aware of the existence of these large off-balance sheet obligations. This makes it difficult to anticipate the scale and geography of dollar rollover needs. And again, like if analysts whose job it is to cover banks and financial institutions in the global monetary system don't even know that this exists, what chance does the layperson have who doesn't even know, what financial lingo and stuff? The reality is the financial lay people who have tried to dig into this and figure this out probably have a better handle on it than the experts.
Yeah, but the key here, I think the key advantage that we have, Brent, just is that we know what we don't know. Yeah. And so many of the quote-unquote experts out there that are running billions and billions and billions of dollars just see the dollar universe as though it exists within the United States. And therefore they make decisions based on that premise, which we know is completely false. But let's, for those of the viewers who didn't actually see this report, let's go over to it really quick. Okay. And I just want to, wrong one. I just want to get some of your insights here. So where I started reading it is right here, and I saw this based on the charts that you tweeted. It's so that the title here is, or at least of this section, dollar debt in FX swaps and forwards, huge, missing, and growing. Right. That's what I said on my whiteboard videos. That doesn't exactly install confidence in the global monetary system, does it? Right. Yep. And they go on to say how just non-banks, they're looking at 25 trillion, up from 17 in 2016. Non-U.S. banks, upwards of 35 trillion. And they point out that much of this is very short term, meaning that it matures within the next year. And I know some of the pushback I got, let's go down to these charts that reflect this, Brent. Some of the pushback I got on my video is, well, what's the big deal? They've rolled this debt over several times in the past. I'm any different. And I'm like, well, you must have missed that part in my whiteboard video where I discussed the fact that over the last, 9 months, year, whatever, the Fed has been raising rates and at a historic level, or at a historic rate. And therefore, what they could have rolled over last year at, let's say, 3%, now they're going to have to roll over at, let's just say, 7% or 8%, because although the Fed is enacting monetary policy for the United States, that does impact dollar lending throughout the entire globe. So getting over to these charts here, on the far left, we see the total amount, and this is an estimation by the BIS. That's this yellow line. So that would include these derivatives, the FX swaps, FX forwards, and currency swaps outstanding. Brent, do you understand these derivatives enough to know why the FX forwards and currency swaps, or maybe more specifically the FX forwards, are something that the BIS is considering debt, like dollar-denominated debt or any currency debt?
Well, I think we should be clear here, and everybody will interpret this stuff a little bit differently. And the reason that it isn't on balance sheets and it's off balance sheet is it's not technically debt. But it's kind of like saying, if I have $1 million mortgage that's on the books, and if you run my credit report, it's on there. But I also own Mr. Loan Shark down the street $50,000. That doesn't show up on my credit report, but it doesn't mean that I don't owe that $50,000, right?
Exactly. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be paid back the real money.
And I'm not familiar with all the accounting practices and regulations and the rules that went into why some things are on balance sheet and some things are not considered on balance sheet. But the fact these, for whatever reason, are not considered on balance sheet And one of the main reasons is they, as you very well explained in your video, and before we go any further in it, let me just say, if you're not familiar with this stuff, go watch George's. He's got an 18-minute video that explains this report better, or at least as good as I can't really improve upon what George did. And then Alf Picatello, if you go to the Macro Compass website, he did a very good summary of this as well, with full explain all this in more detail.
And his handle is Macro Alf, just for those.
Macro Alf, yeah. So those are two good resources to kind of get up to speed on this. And so, in defense of the people that do this analysis, and it isn't on balance sheet, but what I think the BIS is saying here, even though it's not on balance sheet, it's not like this money isn't owed and these aren't out there, right?
Yeah. And it's not like, but I think maybe even a better way to say that is even if it's off balance sheet, it doesn't mean that it is off profit and loss, off P&L. Right. You still have to have the P part of it coming in, even if it's off balance sheet.
Right. Well, and then I think, again, and this is speculation on my part, but I think the reason that it's not included on balance sheet is because these are offsetting transactions. Euros are going this way, and the equivalent amount of dollars is going that way, and at the end of the year they have to swap them back. And so the idea is that these offset each other. So the risk isn't really 80 trillion or whatever the number is, because it's all going to get reversed at the end of the year anyway.
See, I don't get that. I don't understand how that's an offsetting transaction. Because both entities in the equation, let's just say it's a European entity and a U.S. entity. In the U.S., I'm looking at the FX swaps now. Yep. And the U.S. entity needs euros. So the European entity will borrow the euros. They've still got that debt. They borrow it directly from a bank in Europe at a lower rate, and then they give the euros to the U.S. firm, which now has them on their balance sheet. And the U.S. firm does the same thing for the European firm that may have an operation in the United States. But it's still a loan that those two entities have to pay back. And I don't know, and it's not just a $10 million. You got $20 million worth of debt, for heaven's sakes.
Listen, I'm on your side, George. I'm just I'm speculating as to why this stuff is off balance sheet. But this is the reason that people will say it's not as big a deal. It's because these happen all the time. They go back and forth. Yeah, one side is owed, but the other side owes as well. And at the end, you just have to settle up. You pay the currency the interest rate differential, the currency difference. And the thing is with currencies, this kind of goes back to the heart again to what I've tried to enlighten people on, and Jeff's done a fantastic job of enlightening people on. Currencies typically don't move that much. Typically, a big currency fluctuation is 4 or 5%. In which case, yeah, there is some risk in these. At the end of the year, maybe the euro costs a little more, maybe the yen costs a little less, and so maybe there's a little bit of principal risk or in these transactions, but it's typically not 20 or 30%. But because of where we're at in the cycle, we've got this debt super cycle, we've got the potential for a sovereign credit crisis, you got a potential for defaults, and currencies start moving 10, 20, 30%. That's when at the end of the year, or when interest rates go from 1% to 5%, right? Right. That's when so for the last several years, maybe 10 years, you could say this hasn't been a risk because interest rates have been at zero and currencies have been stable, right? Yeah. And because so the problem comes is when it's time to roll these over, and then one currency has moved dramatically against the other, or interest rates are dramatically higher, or where it really, really, really becomes a huge problem is when one of the entities goes out of business. And so even though it was notionally flat to begin with, now your counterparty's out of business. You may have been completely correct in your goal or your idea, but if your counterparty can't pay you,
we stir, we crash, we mijote on écrase,
your counterparty on another trade.
There's a good red now. 7 more minutes of boiling.
It becomes this daisy chain of defaults, right? And so that is the issue. And so, the very smart people have responded to these posts and said, everybody relax, these are just notional numbers, they've been around forever, it's not a big deal. And it's on a normal, regular, everyday basis, it's not a big deal until it is. And then it becomes the biggest deal in history.
That's a great point, Brent. Let me play devil's advocate, because it just dawned on me why someone would say these are offsetting. I think I get it now. So to be fair here, guys, I think what they're saying is entity A in the United States needs euros, so they're going to borrow dollars to give to the European corporation. So that's going to be on their balance, or should be on their balance sheet. But then the European corporation is going to give them $10 million worth of euros. So I think that when they're saying it's offsetting, they're meaning because the U.S. entity is taking on 10 million in debt, but they're receiving 10 million
That's right.
from the so on their balance sheet, if it was on the balance sheet, those two transactions would offset each other. But you point out, I think brilliantly, that okay, they might offset, but if one of those entities in the daisy chains goes bust, then since this whole euro-dollar global monetary system is so incestuous, and there's so much counterparty risk layered on counterparty risk on counterparty risk, you don't have to have that many defaults in order for the whole thing to collapse in on itself.
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And this is why, this is fundamentally why, when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, it was such a big deal. Because Lehman Brothers was a huge counterparty in the derivatives market. And so even though the trades offset, when one of these goes bankrupt and then there's a hole, and then all of a sudden all the trades that Goldman Sachs had with Lehman Brothers, now Goldman Sachs has the hole, right? And so now anybody that had a derivative swap with Goldman Sachs, now they have a potential problem because Goldman has a problem. And it's so incestuous and it's so big and then it leads to uncertainty, right? And in uncertainty, what do you do in uncertainty? You stop lending. You hold on to those. Going back to my musical chairs example, you grab onto a chair as quickly as you can because
So guys, I got some great news for the community. We have just landed an interview with Patrick Riley from Reaper Financial, one of the main corporations that filed a amicus brief in the Ripple versus SEC case. And this is Fred Rispoli worked on this amicus brief. We're releasing this interview on Wednesday at 7 p.m. It's something you're not going to want to miss, guys. I am just so excited. The information in there is going to be absolutely amazing. And he has dropped some big bombshells that you're going to want to hear. So Wednesday at 7, you're going to want to be there and you're going to want to see it. All right. Can't wait to release it to you. Morning, guys. Welcome to Coffee Chat. Wow, it just smells so good out here this morning. Beautiful, like we've had it's just like it got a wash. And what I think's happened is we got a little bit of rain overnight, and of course you can see all the mistiness in the air there, but still, it just feels fresh and clean. It is beautiful. Well, guys, I have one article for you this morning and one personal experience. And this one is kind of interesting to me. It really actually took me aback. So, as you guys know, I have been doing some one-on-one coaching. Well, how I've been invoicing for the coaching is through PayPal. Now, I have been both a PayPal customer and a PayPal merchant for multiple years, and have transferred thousands of dollars of business revenue through invoicing through PayPal. So, needless to say, out of the absolute blue, without any notice, nothing whatsoever, PayPal, I go into PayPal yesterday and I find out that they have locked up my account and limited it to something like, and this is the crazy part. So I get on there and I find out it was limited to $718.37 of transactional business that I could do in an entire month, if you can believe it, and that, that everything else beyond that, they were just going to hold it. And so I'm like, what on earth? So I phoned them up and I talked to them about this, and they tell me, well, we've set this policy in place since 2022, And the reason is to prevent, you know, any kind of, you know, fraud or people getting hurt. And I said, okay, I understand that there's a necessity to help prevent that. But why wouldn't you reach out to me and communicate with me that, you know, beforehand that you were going to do that? And on top of that, if you look at my lengthy history, and the lady that I was speaking to said, yeah, I can see you have a long, long history with us. I said, has there ever been a time where, as a purchaser, that I never paid for a product? Oh, no, sir. I said, oh, okay. Now, has there ever been a time as a merchant that anybody has ever come back and registered or lodged any kind of complaint in all the multiple years that I've been dealing with PayPal, you know, with you? Oh, no, sir. I said, so why on earth would you not reach out and communicate with me and say, hey, you know, we need you to hold certain amount on your PayPal account just in case, you know, you face a situation like this or this? Oh, well, sir, it's the AI that did it. The AI did it? What are you talking about? Oh, well, we have an automated accounts review system, and it just puts it in there. I said, okay, well, how do we get that resolved now that I'm talking to a person? Oh, there's really nothing we can do about it, sir. I'm like, are you serious? And so, you know, basically, and then I end that call. I'm like, well, I guess if there's nothing you can do, what could you possibly do? So I end that call. And, you know, about a half hour later, I go back in, because what I've decided, guys, is, hey, look, here's an organization that, just imagine, for you out there that are business owners, I've been a business, you know, sole proprietor on various businesses over the years, but just imagine if you interacted with your clients that way, that you didn't even communicate with them, you gave them no notice, no nothing, and then all of a sudden, bang, you took an action that would really hurt their business, right? And imagine just how long you would stay in business if you did that. Now, for most of us, we look at treating the people that we work with as the paramount deal, right? And the reality is, they just don't care. They truly and honestly don't care. Now, look, if when you're little and small, and you're the kind of you're out there saying, oh yeah, I'm gonna, you know, you're gonna be the best support, the best business.
Arrêtez le
To a
chauffage.
certain size, and you're like, I don't
Leave
give
it
a
for
crap. Well,
about
as far as
20
I'm
minutes.
concerned, what you're really revealing there is
Then do the
the
third
character you
batch.
have when
Pendant
you
20
made
minutes, après on va
right?
faire le
Is the character you have back
troisième
here.
batch, third batch.
But what was going on over here was disingenuous, because look, character defines behavior, right? I mean, I believe that we're supposed to care about our fellow man. So, hey, you know, that affects how I treat somebody else. Now, God bless the people that were working for PayPal, because those employees, those call center people were fantastic, and I give them a lot of credit. It's not them that made this ridiculous nonsense happen. They have to deal with it. And even for me, like, look, if you can imagine me frustrated, you know, even then I was frustrated, you know, but they handled it well. But the issue is this, the agency itself shows that we really don't care. We're not going to communicate with you. We're not going to even give you an opportunity to redress any kind of issues that you have. This is the way it is, and that's it. And I'm telling you guys, I am not using PayPal anymore. So when I went back in the second time after making that decision, based on all those factors I just gave you, I went in, you know, I canceled some pending invoices and reached out to those folks and said, hey, look, this is what's happened to me, and as a result, I'm not going to be using PayPal anymore. I went back in and I noticed now it wasn't $718.36 or 37 cents, somewhere in there. It wasn't that. They reduced it, guys, to $300 a month. Now, you tell me what business, and by the way, this is a business PayPal account and has been for multiple years with a fantastic history. And so, any case, what business out there could even survive only being able to utilize liquidity of $300 a month? Even your local kid that comes out and mows your lawns, if he had a PayPal account, it's going to be making more than $300 a month. Come on. And it just, to me, that demonstrated that, hey, they really don't want our business. They want to manipulate, they want to control, they want to use heavy-handedness. Now, having said that, you know the whole out of sight, out of mind thing? To me, this came as a big shock. So I went on YouTube, and I found out there are multiple people that have been in this fix, and in some cases, they're holding tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and with seemingly impunity and with an I don't care kind of attitude. And I thought, PayPal needs to be called out for this, because it is an abuse of the, basically, the business relationship that we have. PayPal is a money service business. They're not a police agency. They're not an enforcement agency. Yes, there is some due diligence that we all have to do to ensure against fraud and things like that. KYC, right? Know your customer, anti-money laundering, watch histories, all that kind of stuff. But no, what they've set their algorithm up to do is to monitor people's sales. So let's say you have 1 month, apparently, and you have a banger month. For whatever reason, everybody loves whatever product it is you're selling. They go in and they buy it like crazy. But the next month doesn't happen, and you have maybe less than half the sales you had the prior month. Well, according to what I've, seen and heard from a lot of people on YouTube, is PayPal will come in and do this stuff and put these holds and limits on. So they literally are holding people hostage for legitimate business and legitimate money that they've earned in their business, and it's not PayPal's money. They're the custodian of it, but it is the revenue of the individual business. But this kind of heavy-handedness just shows you guys that, look, we can see what's coming down the road. Now, hey, this was my experience with PayPal, and I'm not once bitten, twice shy. I am not going back. Really, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, we're not talking about a significant amount, and, the way I look at it, they're not worth it. PayPal is not worth, other than to call them out for their very unprofessional and horrendous business practices as they deal with individuals. Oh, and having said that, just not too long ago, it was out in the news that PayPal was going to fine people for misinformation, and they were going to be the big granddaddy of us all, controlling the narrative out here of what people's opinions and thoughts and that's. And if PayPal deemed it was misinformation, well, they're going to come in and they're going to fine you. Well, for me, guys, that is just over the top, and I don't know if. And then, by the way, they backpedaled from that position, right? So I'm calling them out, because that is the worst customer service that I can ever fathom, especially when you're dealing business to business, and how that's my view. Now, if you've had an experience like that, or you know that someone does, drop that down in the comments there. Let's share this information. I'd like to know just how many other people with absolutely stellar track records are being stomped on by PayPal without any notice whatsoever, and when PayPal says, hey, we don't like what you're doing, or whatever their algorithm is coming up with, and some AI apparently doing it, so you let me know. Anyhow, so the second thing that I read an article today, and this comes out of the Bank of International Settlements, and it has to do with FX swaps. Now, apparently, there is $80 trillion of hidden debt. $80 trillion. Guys, the whole gross domestic product globally was something around 92, maybe 95 trillion last year. So 80 trillion of hidden debt. I'm telling you, that is a crisis waiting to happen. Now, more than likely, what took place there with these FX swaps is that as the dollar was climbing, a lot of these big movers of foreign exchange and monies and pension funds, by the way, are tagged into this. What ended up happening is they got stuck. They got trapped because the dollar whipped up so high, and they got stuck in there. Well, $80 trillion, guys, that is enough to bring the global financial system to its absolute knees. And if this thing implodes, the whole wide world is in for one of the biggest collapses in the history of mankind. Now, having said that, it would not surprise me that if something really crazy goes on there behind the scenes in that basis, because we know that some of the needs, and if this, they got stuck, they got trapped. Movers of foreign exchange and monies and pension funds, by the way, are tagged into this. What ended up happening is they got stuck. They got trapped because the dollar whipped up so high. It happened now. More than likely, what took place there with these FX swaps is that as the dollar was climbing, a lot of these 92, maybe 95 trillion last year. So 80 trillion of hidden debt. I'm telling you, that is a crisis waiting to happen now. More than likely, what took place there with these FX swaps is that as the dollar was climbing, a lot of these big movers of foreign exchange and monies and pension funds, by the way, are tagged into this. What ended up happening? They got stuck. They got trapped because the dollar whipped up so high and they got stuck in there. Well, $80 trillion, guys, that is enough to bring the global financial system to its absolute knees. And if this thing implodes, the whole wide world is in for one of the biggest collapses in the history of mankind. Now, having said that, 92, maybe 95 trillion last year. So 80 trillion of hidden debt. I'm telling you, that is a crisis waiting to happen now. More than likely, what took place there with these FX swaps is that as the dollar was climbing, a lot of these big movers of foreign exchange and monies and pension funds, by the way, are tagged into this. What ended up happening is they got stuck. They got trapped because the dollar whipped up so high and they got stuck in there. Well, $80 trillion, guys, that is enough to bring the global financial system to its absolute knees. And if this thing implodes, the whole wide world is in for one of the biggest collapses in the history of mankind. 92, maybe 95 trillion last year. So 80 trillion of hidden debt. I'm telling you, that is a crisis waiting to happen now. More than likely, what took place there with these FX swaps is that as the dollar was climbing, a lot of these big movers of foreign exchange and monies and pension funds, by the way, are tagged into this. What ended up happening is they got stuck. They got trapped because the dollar whipped up so high and they got stuck in there. Well, $80 trillion, guys, that is enough to bring the global financial system to its absolute knees. And if this thing implodes, the whole wide world is in for one of the biggest collapses in the history of mankind. Now, having said that, it would not surprise me that if something really crazy goes on there behind the scenes in that basis, because we know that some of these, their Hashgraph and the XRP Ledger and have been eyed as tokenizing global debt. It would not surprise me if we saw something down the road. That's just my speculation on that. But the fact that the Bank of International Settlements is coming out there and reporting that there's 80 trillion, not billion, trillion dollars in hidden debt is unfathomable. You don't even have to think about whether Tether went down and how that would affect this space. Guys, $80 trillion in debt is enough to collapse the global economy and literally send the whole wide world back into the dark ages. I'm not kidding, it's that bad. Anyway, let's end on a positive note. God is always good. And the fact of the matter is, there's so much to be thankful for. We woke up this morning, we breathed fresh air. I mean, look, one of the most uncontrollables we have is this. We all hope to wake up in the morning, but we all go to sleep at night. Now, when we're sleeping, one of the most uncontrollable situations that we face, and we do it every single day. So believe it or not, every time you lay your head down and go to sleep and believe that you're waking up in the morning, you're exercising some level of faith, right? Because it's way out of your control. So guys, just before you go, I want to share something with you here. This is John. Now, John went out and bought one of the Digital Outlook coffee cups and hats, and I've sent it out there. Hey, if you buy one of these cups and you take your picture and you say it's okay and you want me to put it on our coffee chats in the morning, I will be happy to do it. So, John, congratulations on your cup and hat, and thank you for being such a great part of this community. I really do appreciate it, and I just hope you have an amazing, amazing day. Well, anyways, guys, I hope you have a great day. Now, remember, we have an amazing video coming out later on this afternoon, this evening at 7 o'clock, our interview with Reaper Financial. It is going to be phenomenal. Guys, there is stuff in this interview that has never been seen nor heard before. You are not going to want to miss it, and that is not an exaggeration. It is going to be amazing. So 7 p.m. Texas time. And until then, guys, I hope you have an amazing day, and take care.
Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be looking at AMC Entertainment, AMC, and A. Talking about the big news that is out today in terms of the $80 trillion worth.
And we're going to have the other batch. I'm going to filter, on va faire la même affaire, c'est comme ça. Like this, it's on top, and we're gonna go slow so that there's no waste. Stabilize, okay. Let it rain. On écoule tranquillement. Stabilize. Yay, minimal waste. Gaspillage minimum. Go Dragon, go. Yes. That's it. Et voilà. Minimum waste, baby. Gaspillage minimum. On va mettre ça de côté comme ça. Here on the side. And this one, we're gonna bring it. On va la mettre sur. There you go. Nice. This is full. On va laisser là. Ta-da. The other one, now we got 2, and we'll get ready for the third one, but there's a little bit, so we're gonna do the same thing as before. And on va mettre ça, ta-da, parce qu'il en reste, on va faire la même affaire. On va juste enlever ça avant, tu sais. We're just gonna take this, what is left over there with this. Okay. On va le mettre dans le... dans ça. Where's the leftovers? There we go. See, a little bit more. Tack. Yeah. Tack. Yeah. And tack. And we're gonna put them here again. So, on met ici. Put it there, see. 1, 2. 3. There's a little bit more juice there. Here's that. Get ready for the third batch, for the third. Et ça, on va mettre ici comme ça. Down. 1, 2. 1. Spill over on the ground sur le plancher. On va le mettre là. Pow. Oh, non, pas de dégâts, pas de dégâts, pas de dégâts. No spillovers. And there we go. Third one. And now we got some more for the tasting. Let's see how this batch came. Come on, sit batch. This is real raw. Du jus de raisin. This is real raw juice. Hot wild grape juice. Du jus de raisin sauvage. Wild grape juice. On va la goûter. Merci la déesse. Thank you, goddess, who dances with her brother's son. Ah, this one came out way better than the first. Celle-là est vraiment meilleure que la première. Mais celle-là, wow. Different batches, different tastes, different. The amount of grapes, the amount of boiling, the amount of stirring, everything can influence. The different grapes, the quality of the grapes. Some are bigger, some are smaller, some are more ripe, some are. But overall, wow. Absolutely delicious and raw, real, naturel, raw. You can't get more raw, real, natural grape juice than this. Tu peux pas avoir plus de jus, pas de sucre, no sugar, no, just real grape juice, real jus de raisin, straight from nature, directement dans la nature, the hot Island, Montreal, from the bushes and the vines, hot Island, Montreal. Full moon blessing, pleine lune. So it has a nice red, dark, deep red texture. I should heal me head to toe and be transformed and get more muscle. Goddess grapes. Isis is what it is. And we're gonna rinse this and we're gonna head for the third batch. So I've had 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and 6. So now we can put water in it again. Some more. And enough water, we're gonna boil it again. Start the boiling process right away. And the same thing, on fait la même chose. La répétition, on répète. We're gonna repeat. And we're gonna clean the grapes, les raisins, on les nettoie. We're gonna wash them. Now we're gonna add a little bit here on the side, a little bit of red, un peu de rouge. Okay, that's it. And we add, because it's gonna start boiling soon. And these grapes, more grapes. More grapes, more grapes. Plus de raisin, plus de raisin. Plus de raisin. More grapes, more grapes, more grapes. Wash, wash, wash. Drain, drain, drain. And we add them to the mix. On les mélange, les mélange. We put them in the water, boil it, to boil it, to boil it. I got a good batch. This is the third and final batch, la troisième et dernière batch. Third and final batch of yours truly making some Some wild grapes from the wild. La mère nature. God is blessed. Béni par la déesse. Qui danse avec son frère le soleil. Dance with a brother sun to make these grapes. Well washed, bien lavé, bien rinçage. Add it in. And we got some more here, some more grapes on the side. Some more. Orange grapes. Yeah. There on the other side. No waste. Let's see. There are these, and last one. There we go. All this. Wash. And there we go. Add it up. Raisin, sauvage, wild grapes. Ta-da! That's it for that. These, start rinsing a bit. We won't need this one, so we can start washing it. We need this one again now. I'm gonna wash it with some soap. The big one we will need, but not this one. So this one I'm gonna start washing right away. Soap, rinse, savon, rinçage, et une troisième fois savon, rinçage. There we go. And now we're ready for the third batch and final batch, the troisième batch. Et voilà, there you go. Grapes. We're not going to crush them yet until they start boiling. Well, after about 10 minutes into the boiling, then we start. That's my Dragon procedure, c'est ma procédure. À peu près 10 minutes, 15 minutes, quand ça commence à bouillir. Après ça, je les écrase. Pas avant. Not before. That is my technique. That is the technique. Goddess instructed technique, so I'm not going to question. Et voilà, there we go. Take a little bit of photos. This is no more space. Space out, running out of space in the iPhone. Gotta clear it up, put post. Social media. And we do the same thing third time, la troisième fois la même chose. Ça va bouillir, it's gonna boil, it's gonna rock and roll. We're gonna do the same thing, gonna have 3 batches. And that one's gonna stay there in that. And then we're gonna put them in the bottles. On va faire le transfert dans les bouteilles. We're gonna transfer them later. About after my third batch is done, I'm gonna start transfer them slowly. If not, I'm gonna cover them and I'm gonna transfer them tomorrow because that's no rush. As a matter of fact, I will cover them just because, you know, there's dust or stuff like that that can be there. So I'm just gonna cover them. Cover both the first batch and the second batch here. I'm gonna cover them like that, tack, and this one tack, or vice versa. Vice versa is better. Yeah, fits better. So first bowl and the second bowl. So I got 2 bowls, and that one's gonna stay there and go directly. I'm gonna cover it, and maybe tonight at midnight, or tomorrow morning. I'm going to cover them so there's no rush for the transfer for the holidays and the transfer in the bottles. 1 bottle, 2 liters is going to be $1 million. Going to pay my debt and give half to my sister. So PayPal, Quebec, Canada, North America only from yours truly, the batch. Special 800 Dragon made from wild grapes. $1 million. Non-negotiable. Canadian. So US is about it's about 770,000. Have a good grape juice, natural grape juice for the Sabbath, which I'm gonna have for the next 7 weeks. Maybe it's gonna last me each bottle 1 weekend. Starting from the weekend of December 24th until maybe mid-March or so. Parce qu'avec ces 3 bouteilles-là, si je viens encore, je vais en avoir 7. So I'm going to have 7, but 7 times 7, that's 49 days, right? Parce que 7 fois 7, c'est 49 jours. Fait que, pas vraiment jusqu'en de décembre à mi-février. From December till mid-February, correction, not till March. I miscalculated. Because 7 weeks, 7 times for all weekend, 1 bottle per weekend for the Sabbath, pour le sabbat, c'est chaque fin de semaine. Donc, si je bois la première pour le 24 décembre, ça va être du 24 décembre au 20 février à peu près. Right? Yeah. Or 11th of February. 11 février à peu près. 11th of February, 11 février à peu près. So, something 11 février, 11 February, mid-February, something like that. Because 7 times 7, if I start on... On peut faire le calcul, je vais voir, parce que là je suis curieux. I'm really curious how long it'll last me. Because I already have 4 bottles, right? I have 4 bottles. So if I have 7 total bottles, that means if I drink the first one December 24th, the second one December 31st, on Saturdays. Let's assume I drink one, share with my sister half, Saturdays. So starting from not next Saturday, because next Saturday is the 17th, but the Saturday 7 days after. So on the 24th. So 1 on the 24th, 1 on the 31st, 1 on the 7th of January, 1 on the 14th. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 on the 21st of January, that's 5. 6 on the 28th of January. I will be 7th on the 5th, and if I have 11th of February, something like that. Almost February. Depending when I drink it, it could be on the 5th of February, the 5 février. So I'm gonna go again, try again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. On the 5th of février, 5 février, ça va faire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 semaines. À partir de 24 décembre, c'est à peu près le 5 février. Mais si j'en ai 8, if I have 8, it will be until the 11th of February. So if I have an 8th one, which I probably could have, it's going to be on the 11th of February. And then if I have more, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, I need for until March 19th. So I would need 13. That means I would have to go really before it starts snowing. Next week I'll have to go get more. I mean, in theory I could. We'll see what happens. In theory I could. Why not? It'll be work. Make some grape juice, natural grape juice, you know. Thinking of worst case scenarios, thermonuclear war, la guerre thermonucléaire. C'est possible. 42 years from 1947 to 1989, there were so many nuclear bombs built between the East and by the Soviet Union and the West, USA. So, il y a eu, pendant 42 ans, depuis 1947 à 1989, il y a eu tellement des bombes nucléaires entre l'Est, représenté par le USSR, l'Union soviétique, l'Empire soviétique, et l'Ouest, nous autres, aux États-Unis, quand on a bâti des ICBM, des roquettes avec des bombes nucléaires. Fait. Comme dans mon scénario de géopolitique commencé en 2019, like my scenario in 2019, I am a world peace advocate pour la paix mondiale. We gotta channel, and sublimate his keywords of my philosophies. Anyways.
Of hidden debt, and how much of that is consists of the top short sellers of AMC, such as Citadel and Virtue. We're going to be looking along at the new requirements that will be implemented going into the end of 2022, which will mean that firms such as Citadel will have to cover their over-leveraged positions and many more in the video, so make sure you guys watch until the very end. As always, we're going to start off with the chart for AMC and A. Now, looking at AMC today, we are down 8.81%, and we have covered this in the Sunday Outlook video. If you do look at this, the reason why it is different from in terms of what happened back in Thursday is that there is a massive difference in the volume in the two trading days. And so today we closed at 745. We went below the zone, but we talked about how a pullback is normal, and I'll be looking at some data later on to show you guys that as well. But that is the first thing for AMC in terms of, yes, we are seeing a pullback, but the week hasn't ended and the volume is extremely low. So if we are able to get volume back in,